across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning. It's great to be back. It all seemed to kick off while I was away in a humid Florida. Look, I've come back and I can qualify for some DEI privileges. I can't wait to be offered exclusive jobs and all the rest of it in our two-tier society. Hey, I might go commit some crime a bit later. No one can touch me now. Anyway, it's delightful to be back and in your company. I hope you've had a wonderful time. And isn't there a lot to discuss? I was certainly kept busy when I was stateside. Everybody wanted to know about Henry Novak and the reactions. Everybody then wanted to know about the attempted beheading in Belfast. And you know what? We're not talking about what's going on across Europe either, are we? There have been mass protests in Belgium. Student protests. No, they're not. They're migrant riots, OK? And I have a feeling that this is it. The summer of discontent looms, because there's going to be another incident. Like clockwork, there's going to be another awful atrocity at the hands of some sort of illegal invader who has no right to be here, who you and I are subsidising, and we've had enough. We're not being listened to. And now, head in hands, for goodness sake, for crying out loud, this government are saboteurs. This government are traitors to the nation. Not only are they presiding over porous borders, not only are they running our economy over a cliff edge, not only are they failing to defend food security, fuel and energy supply, protect our frontiers, not only that, but now we learn with the resignation of John Healey that utter ideological imbecile, a woman who should not even manage a village library, who essentially is in charge of what seems the entire country and Sir Keir Starmer by the looks of things, has decided that she doesn't want to pay any more into defence, despite the fact, as we speak, Russia is building armaments and bases all against the frontiers of NATO. They're massively building up, ready to do something. And Rachel Reeves, nah, let's just keep throwing money towards welfare. I know, you know that extra 10 billion that we needed to give defence, just the bare minimum, just so it could, I don't know, function? So we could actually have a plane or two in the sky for our self-defence, or a boat that actually can get out of dry dock? Oh, no, let's not worry about that. 10 billion is all it took. And do you know what? 10 billion is what we pay for foreigners on welfare, for people who shouldn't even be living off mine and your hard-earned pound, people who've just turned up and decide that they would rather sit on their hands and let us run around setting our alarm clocks at Lord knows what hour in the morning, just so Rachel Reeves can go, thank you, I'd rather give this to Suleiman and Mohammed. It is absolutely ridiculous. We've gotten to a stage that I'm convinced this government aren't inept. I'm convinced they're actually just working for our foreign enemies, because what else is the explanation for this utter lunacy? Either Rachel Reeves is brain dead, which makes her dangerous, or she is willfully dangerous. And quite frankly, I don't care. I don't care anymore which one it is, because the outcome is the same. The outcome is you and I are being imperilled while we work, we slog day and night, round the clock. And for what? What have we got to show for it? What have we even got left to give to our kids? They vandalised our culture. They seem to utterly despise us. They fail after repeated attacks and extreme criminality at the hands of illegals to even do the bare minimum at dealing with that issue. Why do they seem to beatify anybody who is from the third world, and we, you know, Western Europeans, oh, we're dreadful to them. We're monsters. We deserve to have to self-flagellate at the altar of wokery. I mean, honestly, these people at this point should be put in the dock. I don't know what has possessed them. I don't know how they ever got to power on a vacuous manifesto. I don't know how they're maintaining their position of power. I've got no idea why people in Makerfield would think that changing the person at the top is going to change the situation at all. These blimmin' Labour Party leftist lovies don't care. They don't care how much they trash this country. They don't care that there's nothing left behind. They don't care that you're at your wits' end. You're knackered, you're exhausted, you're demoralised, you're desperate, you're frustrated, you feel abandoned, and this is your country. And they are supposed to serve you because guess what? You pay their wages as well, but they don't serve you, do they? I don't really know who they serve at this point because it's definitely nothing to do with the interests of the United Kingdom. Utterly repugnant, abhorrent. And I am proud of John Healey for stepping down and calling it out and saying it like it is, and Al Cairns following him. I'm glad that they stood up and had the gumption to say enough is enough, because if they have sacrificed their positions and come out and said, we are now in danger as a nation, I think we better start listening. Right? It's all very well people like me saying it on a regular basis and other right-wing commentators and opposition parties, but when it's coming from within your own ranks and people who know a thing or two about the military, and they look at these plans to only finance an increase in defence spending by 0.08% of GDP. What is that? £2 blimmin' 50? I mean, for crying out loud, these people are evil. Their behaviour borders on criminal. We treat our veterans like scum of the earth. Oh, they want to run around in witch hunts, persecuting them for things that they may or may not have done in the theatre of war, preventing them actually being able to act on instinct and protect their own lives in the line of duty, protecting us. I don't know what it is. Are they all mad? Are they all on the blimmin' peace pipe of an evening? Are they lost their marbles? Or do they just despise the West and everything about it? Like I said, at this point, it doesn't matter. We don't even need to figure that out. We just need to figure out how they have to go. Because I don't think we can sustain this as a nation. I don't think we can live with diminishing food security, diminishing fuel supplies, diminishing financial security, diminishing protection of our frontiers, diminishing ability to fund fighting foreign foes. Because we can't continue like this. There'll be nothing left. Nothing left after 3 more years of this. Seriously. I mean, for crying out loud, I don't know how we, a once great nation, a once great international trading nation, the jewel of the, naval forces, we once, our little island, managed to run 1/3 of the entire world, right? I'm not saying let's bring back the empire, but from that to this, where the rest of the world runs us. We're a mad Sudanese migrant and a, Somalian who turned up yesterday in the back of a lorry, get treated like the arrival of the Queen of blimmin' Sheba, while you, my friend, oh, they hate you. Oh, don't you mistake it. They cannot stand you. They cannot stand us. And I'm absolutely fed up. When is the final wake-up call? When are we actually going to see some movement out of these people? After the disgusting, horrific atrocity, the needless, abhorrent death of that poor wee lad, Henry Novak, they could have turned around and said, you know what, we're going to scrap DEI. Did they? No. No. When they told us, wow, we got no money left in the kitty, really difficult, we didn't want to have to put up taxes, but I guess we're going to have to. They didn't need to suddenly increase the child benefits cap, did they? Didn't need to lift that and suddenly start paying Fatima thousands of pounds every month to, I don't know, keep generating the next generation of non-British people. No. They could have made a sensible policy decision on that front. They could have looked at universal credit and welfare spending and that welfare bill that their backbenchers refused to put through. They could have stood up, Starmer behind a podium and said, these are the tough choices. My own party has got to understand that if they don't do this, they are imperiling this nation and they were served to defend it and serve it. He could grow a spine, couldn't he? Rather than just sit there feeling sorry for himself because everybody, even in his own party, thinks he's useless and needs to go. And what on earth, if he does go, we're going to usher in his place? Because everyone with half a brain cell and some sort of semblance of sanity is jumping the ship. It's going to be blimmin' Rachel Reeves by herself, isn't it? Lord help us, blimmin' hemp knitter-in-chief, that one. I honestly don't know where we go from here. I really don't. It is desperate. I just pray that we get a general election before their 3 years is done. I hope that the voters get to say we cannot sustain this. My weak shoulders cannot support all of the madness that you're deciding there in 10 and 11 Downing Street. I've had enough. Maybe we can all go on strike and all simultaneously refuse to pay our taxes. Maybe that would be their comeuppance. I don't know what we can do anymore. I mean, I never would incite any sort of violent protest, riots, but I sympathise with people who think we've got to demonstrate because democratically, we've been absolutely mugged off. We've been gagged. We're not being listened to. We're disregarded, disrespected, disliked. And so what else can we do at this point? Someone somewhere's got to have some answers. And believe you me, watching that by-election in Makerfield, that could be a chance. That could be a chance via the prism of one constituency and one constituency alone, the tens of thousands who are going to determine the fate of this country, its future, and whether or not we just auto-anoint some other mad leftist to continue driving us into the grave. What a huge responsibility on their shoulders. And everybody involved in that needs to think long and hard about what they're doing, because this is the 11th hour. This is not the time for playing politics. This is not the time for messing around. This is not the time for egos and narcissism to stand in the way of saving the United Kingdom. Because judging by yet another disgusting story about decisions made by this ridiculous government, judging by yet more reports of crimes and rapes, I mean, it's just, I'm normalised to it now. I open the newspaper and say, oh, look, some Syrian and Afghanistan migrants have gone on a rampage, raping women. Oh, well, suppose that's just another week in good old UK. No, we're not supposed to become desensitised to this stuff. We're not supposed to shrug our shoulders and just think that's what it's like now. Never you mind, as long as I can go home, double lock my front door at night and weep behind the sofa, I'll just about get through another week. No, we're British. We've got to stand up for what we believe in. We've got to stand up for this nation, because this nation means something. This nation's always been about something. This nation has always led by example. And you know what? It's on all of us now to actually try and do something, anything, to change a trajectory, because, believe you me, once we've driven off the edge of a cliff, you can't get it back. Once you've destroyed your country, it's pretty hard to then save it in retrospect. Anyway, back from holiday, aren't I? Can see I'm well rested, can't you? What do you think about what's going on? What do you think about this absolutely madness that we're learning about the state of our blimmin' defence budget? Crying out loud, let me know. 0344 499 1000 is the number to dial. It's your normal network rate, so we're not charging you for that. We want to hear from you. We want you to vent. We want a bit of communal catharsis, because Lord knows it's the only thing that keeps us on the straight and narrow these days. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp, or indeed leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 8722 is the number if you'd rather send a text message. And again, that is your normal costings and all the rest of it. Also on X, we are at talkTV. It would be really good to have a chat with some of you. All right, shall we take a short break now? I'm back just after this.
I think the trigger for this is people
You think they just did it for no reason whatsoever? You think they rioted last night for no reason?
They took to the streets last night because they were thugs who wanted to engage in violence.
What about the peaceful protesters? There were peaceful protesters all over Northern Ireland as well.
They have a right, as they always should, to protest, but there is always going to be a difference of opinion when it does come to whether it's a legal migrant or an illegal migrant, whether it's a person who has come here to seek refuge or whether it's someone who's come here to work.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back and welcome aboard HMS Common Sense, the brilliant former political editor of The Sun, Trevor Kavanagh. How are you doing, Trev?
Good morning and welcome back.
I know, I've been sitting on a lovely beach in Florida, but not cheering myself up much, it seems. A lot seems to have happened while I've been away to rile me up, and today's top story is no different, really. What do you make of these resignations?
Well, the thing to bear in mind is that John Healey and his deputy Al Carnes are serious politicians, probably one of a handful, two of a handful in this Labour government. And when people like them, with their stature and their commitment to public service above personal ambition, decide to walk the plank, then something seriously is wrong. They used to talk, I mean, you mentioned in your preamble there about the once Great Britain. Well, you could compare this with the collapse of the Roman Empire, which is a corollary. And in those days, they used to talk about the Vandals being at the gate. But here, they're in government, they're in cabinet, they're in Downing Street. And frankly, I think that we are seeing a long, slow beginning of the end of the British Empire. Not just the British Empire, which is long gone, but Great Britain.
It feels like that, and, you know, our situation is mirrored, frankly, across Western Europe, and I don't know when or how we entered some sort of suicide pact with our neighbours, but that's very much how it feels. But, you know, when we look at the rubbish, lack of investment into defence, which even the bare basics, just to be able to sort of semi-put together an assemblage to fight off our foreign foes, it required 10 billion, which by sort of normal government standards isn't exactly, you know, massive amount of money. Then you find out actually that every single year at least 10 billion is paid in welfare handouts to foreigners. Very easy to figure out where the money should come from, surely.
And it's less than the 12 billion saved by the uncapping of the two-child benefit. So, yes, we've got the money. It's all being spent on welfare and feel-good factors for the left-wing members of this government. And it's not going to stop as long as they're in power, whoever is the leader in 3-6 months' time. Andy Burnham is no better at this, and Wes Streeting, were he to become leader, which is unlikely, he would still have to dance to the tune of the Labour MPs, who overwhelmingly want to spend yours and mine and everybody else's money on benefits, as Pat McFadden made clear in that remarkably candid remark to Peter Mandelson on one occasion when he said, every meeting is about finding money in taxes to spend on benefits.
I just don't understand how these people are wired up. I really don't. And then terrifying top story on The Sun's website just before I came on air, which is images released by Denmark's national broadcaster in cooperation with intelligence services are showing quite how Vladimir Putin is creating dozens of bases along Russia's borders with NATO countries. There's an Arctic compound in Pechenga, 5 miles from the Norwegian border. There's new barracks, warehouses, army vehicles there. In Russia's Murmansk area near Finland and Norway, they could now house 17,000 extra soldiers in order to strike the neighbours. Another site's been built near the Estonian border, amassing large numbers of military vehicles. Now, we saw this in the run-up to the invasion of Ukraine. We saw them saying, oh, we're just doing a few drills. Oh, nothing to see here. Just, you know, putting a few vehicles the other side of the border. Vladimir Putin doesn't have to look very far to realise how exposed we are. He must be laughing laughing at us. This is a real and genuine threat. And yet what really gets stuck in my craw is there's one thing that Starmer does every time without fail. As soon as it gets a little bit too hot in the kitchen, as soon as he's got a bit of domestic backlash, and in this instance, it was in the aftermath of the atrocious murder of Henry Novak, he pulls his Zelensky lever, doesn't he? He says, oh, do you want to come over for a photo shoot outside number 10? Oh, he stands there puffing up his chest. We're going to defend Ukraine because it's the right thing to do. We can't even defend ourselves.
And the worst thing about this, Alex, is that it was only last week that Starmer himself was pointing all of the things out that you just mentioned, which is that we could be seeing a threat to a NATO country from Russia, a military threat, within the next 3 or 4 years. He knew that. He was aware of this when he was discussing with Healy the fact that he was cutting his budget. So, yes, I mean, the money is there. It's being spent on other things, and we don't like the results in this country. We do not like what's happening in Northern Ireland. We do not like what's happening on the streets of this country, as you mentioned, with Henry Novak. And I think, frankly, what's happening in Northern Ireland is just the beginning of what's going to happen across Britain in what might be a very long, hot summer.
No, I think you're right. And across Europe, quite frankly, I think there are going to be race riots in Germany, in the Netherlands, in France, in Spain, in Italy, in the United Kingdom, in Ireland. It's going to spread like wildfire. Of that I'm certain, because every single day now.
We have a choice. We're a sovereign, independent country. We are not in the European Union. We do not have to have the ECHR, which binds us to allowing hundreds and thousands of people to come across the channel illegally, not to mention the many thousands more who are still coming across in trucks and lorries.
No, we do have a choice. There's no political will. That is quite clear. There haven't been for successive governments, let alone this one, who want to sort of drive us into some sort of communist dystopia. And yet here we are, critical by-election in Makerfield. And no one can really tell you absolutely what the polling is on the ground there. But it does seem that, you know, the momentum might well be with Andy Burnham, who, a bit like Sir Keir Starmer, just goes around sort of campaigning on vibes. Nobody is really challenging him to say, so hold on, you're doing this because you want to become Prime Minister. What is your manifesto for the country, mate? I think we deserve to know. And I wonder how the good people of Makerfield, in their infinite wisdom, might be contemplating backing him. Do they really think that changing the guy at the top of the Labour Party is going to suddenly revolutionise the way the party decides to create policy or govern the country?
Well, I think that the momentum isn't necessarily with Andy Burnham in Makerfield, because the majority of those votes of those who have been polled is actually for the right of centre political parties, the Tories, Reform and Restore. Together, they would wipe out Andy Burnham. It is because they are divided, which is a catastrophe in itself, that Andy Burnham will almost certainly swan to victory against the wishes of the majority of the people in Makerfield.
But, I mean, the thing is, the Conservatives are sort of polling on a single percentage point, basically, aren't they? At the end of the day, this is all about the wrecking ball in the form of a millionaire farmer who lives down the road from me, who doesn't write his own social media posts, whose candidate's not done a single interview or appeared at any hustings, who basically just lives off creating noise that suit the algorithms of social media. And it seems to me on the ground, their foot soldiers are just trying to be saboteurs of reform. They just seem to be targeting anyone who's put up a reform poster. They go knock on the door and say, no, 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 tell a load of, you know, nonsense and lies, and then want to switch it to Restore. And you have to wonder, why is it the establishment aren't calling him out? When you look at some of the things the supporters of that party have said, even Rupert Lowe on his social media post talking about bringing back hangings, and he's put, you know, whole communities must go. This might appeal to certain people, I'm sure, given how desperate everybody is. But normally you'd have the left wing lining up to take a pot shot at that sort of rhetoric. And yet, deathly silence.
Divide your enemies is the answer there, isn't it? As far as Labour is concerned, this is gold dust. But you have to wonder what mobilises Rupert Lowe, because he knows what he's doing. And this is not about party before country or country before party. This is about Rupert Lowe's ego. It is a personal issue. It's a personal vendetta between him and Nigel Farage. And I think, frankly, that allowing that to change the dynamics of our democracy is reprehensible, frankly, because there is no way that Rupert Lowe is ever going to become Prime Minister. There is a possibility, and quite a large one, that if he were left to himself, Nigel Farage and Reform could form the next government, which would be a blessed relief since at the moment the Tories have no chance and there are no others in that particular ballgame. So Rupert Lowe is in this for a personal ego trip, and it's working for him, and it's working against the country.
Oh, I think he's also got some friends in the former party of government, because I think that they're sitting back watching this. Interesting, isn't it, that they've sort of popped out suggesting deals at the next general election. I don't just have a suspicion, I know that there are various plans in which, one can push Reform down below the point that they can form a government, and then they're going to have to go into a deal with the Tories. And the same old, get their grubby hands back on the levers of power, and nothing changes. Seems to me that that's what's going on.
This, Alex. I've read your Substack on this.
Right. Yeah, I can give you a lot more info as well. Believe you me, we'll have to have a sidebar on it. I've got to do the housekeeping, which is reading all of the names of the various candidates in Makerfield. So here we go. Roll up, ladies and gentlemen. For the Liberal Democrats, we have Jake Austin. Good old Count Binface. He's back for the Count Binface party this time. Andy Burnham, of course, representing the Labour Party. Dan Clark is in there for the Libertarian Party. John Dyer, well, he's standing as an independent. Meanwhile, Ed Gemmell is there for the Climate Party. Paul Gold, another independent. And it wouldn't be an election without them. The official monster-raving loony party represented by Alan Howling, Lord Hope. Robert Kenyon is the plumber for Reform UK. Robert Pownell wants to protect the wild. Well, at least that is the nomenclature of his outfit. Rebecca Shepherd is there for Restore Britain. Sarah Wakefield is going in for the Greens. Peter Ward wants to rejoin the EU. And Michael Winstanley is there representing the Conservative parties. They have it, ladies and gentlemen. It's entirely up to you in a democracy which way you vote. But do remember, it's a very important by-election indeed if you're listening from Makerfield. Let us talk about the other problem blighting our country, shall we, which is the fact that the asylum court backlog has surged to a record high in a year. It's very simple, isn't it, Trevor? They all want to come here because they expect to get a free house, and the likelihood is they will. And if you're from a country like Sudan, you just get waved through because it's war-torn, despite the fact you might be one of the beheaders rather than someone fleeing such people.
Yes, and I think that what the courts have got to do with the government's backing, which is not going to come anyway, is to be able to say at the initial hearing, you are not going to be allowed to appeal against this verdict. That would solve the problem overnight, wouldn't it? And then we should have real deportations. The government's claiming that it's has deported something like 70,000 illegal migrants from this country. Well, it isn't showing any real dent on the numbers that are causing problems in this country. And you've mentioned many of them, some of them absolutely terrifying, not least Henry Novak's murder. But in the Sun today, we've got a spread on what's happening in Northern Ireland. And we quoted one of the people in the locality where these riots are taking place. He said that he was approached by a guy who asked him, his name was David Morrow, he's a caretaker. And he's quoted in the Sun as saying that he was approached by one of these migrants saying, can you tell me where the free money bank is? He was talking about the benefits of it. But that's the way we are seen by the people on the other side of the channel who are doing anything they can to get to this country, especially illegally.
Right, and in some respects, you can't blame them, because if I lived in a hellhole of a nation, if I went to somewhere else, I'd get a house and pocket money and all the rest of it, I'd be gone. I'd go. And yet the difficulty is, if we turn around and say, well, Syria and Afghanistan are such a mess, full of terrorists, we better let people come from there. We can't really do any deep dive into their backgrounds because we've got no intel on them, but simply by virtue of the fact they're from nations engulfed in conflict, we better give them leave to remain. You don't know if you're getting the persecuted or the persecutors. And even, I would hasten to add, and I don't want to seem cold-hearted about this, but if you have young men, because that's what they all seem to be, coming from countries where they have witnessed extreme violence, where their villages have been razed to the ground, their sisters have been raped, their parents have been stabbed and beheaded, they're going to carry some degree of trauma with them. And who knows how volatile they're going to be by the time they get here. I don't understand that the best thing thing I think that the UK could do is actually help to build better refugee camps in Africa. We don't need to invite these war-torn people here.
Well, they certainly won't be arriving with a good grounding in how to behave as a good citizen. So, yes, I think they will import not just a few of their characteristics, but everything they've learned in those countries in order to survive, which is to steal, cheat, and join the corrupt upper echelons. And it's interesting that when some of the migrants who are rounded up in Libya are put under pressure to provide money or suffer appalling consequences, managed to find £5,000 in order to get free. Now, if you've got £5,000 in Libya, you are a comparatively speaking rich man or rich person. And yet this money is available and most of them find it and then they come on their way to Britain. They are not poor asylum seekers in fear of their lives. They're comparatively speaking prosperous people from countries which are in deep trouble and want to get out, as you described. You can't blame them for wanting to get out, but why should they all come here?
No, why should they come here indeed and imperil our own native-born population? Because that seems to be what's going on. Should we take a call, Trev, while I've got you here? We've also got Scott in Bexley Heath on the line. Hello, Scott. Good morning.
Morning, Alex.
What's on your mind?
Yeah, I'm kind of like echoing what you said in your monologue at the top of the hour. For me, it comes across like this. This country very much needs to have a very uncomfortable conversation when it comes to migration. It's got to a point now where it's been years and years and years of placation and consistent nonsense that comes from the political class. They don't live and work among us. They don't talk like we talk. They don't eat where we eat. And it's a case of they're okay with any numbers of people coming in. Now, I've always questioned how many sexual assaults, how many rapes, how many amounts of crime is an acceptable amount before people turn around and say, well, we've made a mistake. And they've still, after all these years, persistently refused to accept that they've made a mistake. And it's now got to a stage where I ask myself this, and I ask this question a lot on X as well. What do we actually benefit from taking in certain people from certain countries? What does Somalia offer this country? What does Eritrea offer this country? What does Afghanistan? What does Pakistan? What does any country in Africa offer this country as it is right now? And the typical answer back is usually something along the lines of, well, it's about cuisine and, they work in certain shops, they do certain sectors. Well, I'm like, well, if that's the trade-off, having a civil society and bringing in people that simply do not assimilate with ours, aren't compatible with us in the slightest, because their own cultures in their own countries don't follow anything that we follow, don't believe in anything that we believe in. Where does this peak arrogance come from? From our political class, that they think that if you just pluck someone from, say, out of Chad or Sudan, that all of a sudden they become perfect British citizens overnight.
Oh, it's all grandstanding. That's the problem. I mean, Trevor, let's talk about this, because I was not, hardly surprised, but, similarly disgusted by the confected outrage from the media establishment after Nigel Farage did a press conference in the wake of Henry Novak's, when we found out what happened, because, of course, the poor young lad lost his life back in December. And I think Nigel Farage spoke for all of us when he said we should respond to this with cold rage being not hot rage, not going to do anything, not actually going and sort of, throwing concrete slabs and projectiles, but we should be utterly disgusted by what we have seen take place. And he was right. And then, of course, you turn on the television and the usual people, or Parliament, PMQs, all their guffawing, trying to make it out like he's the problem. And I just think, where do these people get off? I mean, the weight of facts is in front of them. They cannot be that blind to public opinion and reality, but they just can't let it go.
No, and I think in that call that you just received from one of your listeners, it was the cogent and articulate voice of the average British punter who has resented what's been going on, not in his name or with his permission, for the last 25 years. And I think that things have reached such a point now, Alex, where we really are in a dangerous situation. What we're witnessing in Northern Ireland is not going to stay in Northern Ireland. It is now all kicking off because of incidents like the unbelievable murder of Henry Novak and the murders of so many others, the rapes of so many other innocent white people who are British citizens and feel endangered when they walk the streets of some parts of this country, where it's basically a no-go area and very risky for single women to be walking in. So I think that we've got to a boiling point here. And I hate to invoke the Enoch Powell Rivers of Blood speech, but he was remarkably perceptive and percipient when it came to forecasting the strains and pressures on this society from the importation of millions of people about which we know nothing.
No, this is the problem. I think a lot of people in the media establishment and the political establishment, they might have gone abroad on holiday. They might have even made it as far as Africa, but they'd have been staying in some sort of luxury Bedouin tent, 5-star service, having a multi-thousand-pound safari holiday. They probably haven't walked the mean streets of Karachi as I have through work. They probably haven't lived in a ghettoised suburb of Ghana as I have. They probably haven't spent a year looking at post-election violence in Kenya as I did. They probably have no idea what the countries are like where these people are coming from. And so it's fine. They can just carry around their luxury ideologies like designer handbags and watch us all suffer. Oh, Trevor, thank you ever so much. It's always so good catching up with you. It makes me feel a little bit more sane knowing that I'm in good company indeed. And thank you as well to the brilliant call, Scott in Bexley Heath. If you want to be like Scott and contribute to the show, I really want to hear from you. In fact, especially today, I've missed you guys. It's nice being in Florida, chilling out and watching the world go by remotely while getting myself a suntan. But I did miss you, genuinely, because sitting in here in the throne of Talk Towers is just, it's one of my favourite moments of the week when we all get to hang out together and put the world to rights. So it'd be great to chat with you, especially if you've not phoned before. Why not make it your first call? Because, you know, we are in a bit of a desperate way in this country. We are in dire straits, and so we all have to get up, stand up and do what we can. If that means dialing these digits into your phone, then do it, because I think the audience want to hear from you as well. It makes us all feel like there are more of us than there are of them. 03444 99 1000. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number to send a text message. Write the word talk before you text. I'm going to take a breather, get a cup of tea, but I'm not going to go anywhere, and I hope you don't either, because after the break we're talking to the former chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Elwood, about the shock resignations of Healy and Carnes just after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, hello. Great messages coming in. Oh, back in April, I said there were some dark plans the government were hiding from us. I'm sure they act stupid, but are working on destroying this great country. It's hard to think otherwise, isn't it, these days? The same is happening across Europe by the hands of similar left-wing political madness. What is wrong with protecting your country and the great people who built it, past and present? They're destroying what generations of patriots laid down their lives to protect. Indeed they are. Mark from Somerset says the point when Britain should have had enough was Lee Rigby in 2013. We're in 2026 now. Welcome back, Alex. I thought I was going mad until I heard your opening monologue. I feel so angry and useless with what is going on. There must be something us British people can do to unite. Maybe we should start all flying a flag. Not only does it show our pride, it annoys Starmer and his crew. Oh, something's got to be done, hasn't it? Something's got to be done about the state of our defence, and yet the government ain't doing it. Ain't that just the truth? 0.08%. That's basically non-existent, so no increase to defence spending, despite the fact that Donald Trump has rapped his fist on the desk on many an occasion, despite the fact we've learned that Putin is ramping up his military assets on the borders of various NATO states, despite the fact that all we were asking for, the bare basics just to keep defence, I don't know, semi-ticking over, is the same amount that we pay foreign-born people here in benefits. I mean, it's really not hard to make a decision, is it? Shouldn't be that difficult to prioritise, and yet something about this government, they always choose the wrong side of the argument. Let's speak now to Tobias Ellwood, former chair of the Defence Select Committee. Tobias, I mean, good old John Healey for resigning and laying bare what is going on here. We also had the expose, didn't we, and messages to Mandelson about in those cabinet meetings, all you ever get is, we need to spend more on welfare, we got to spend more on welfare. Well, how about we start protecting our country before we hand out meal tickets to people from abroad?
Yeah, well, good morning. I mean, I think John Healey did something quite courageous, something we don't see very often in British politics, and that's resigning on principle. I think he's actually pushed the government and indeed the Keir Starmer into a very difficult corner. I can't see the Prime Minister surviving that. But what he has done is shone a spotlight just on the state of our defences as they currently are, and underlining the threats that are heading our way. And you cannot deny the fact that our world is getting more dangerous, more insecure, and we are extremely vulnerable. We've had other voices, head of MI6, GCHQ, the head of the armed forces, all breaking ranks to say that the UK is at risk. But you touched on it in your opening monologue. It's all about where does the money come from. I'm afraid politicians as a whole are not pressing to say, let's spend more on defence, because there are so many other pressures on health, on education, transport, all these other things. And that is the big challenge. That is the argument that took place over the last few days between the Treasury and indeed the MOD and Number 10, and the Treasury won. My concern is that it could take a major attack, given our vulnerabilities on the UK, for us to all wake up and recognise that we are in a new era of insecurity, that threats are very, very real indeed, and we are unprepared for the new types of warfare, particularly in the grey zone, that we're now subjected to.
Well, I mean, many would suggest that the grey zone warfare is also perpetrated through mass migratory flows. You've got Wagner mercenaries in Africa stirring up various coups and encouraging people to make treks across the desert and get into small boats. We've seen Russia busing people through Belarus to the borders of Poland. We know full well that our adversaries are using mass migration and illegal migration in order to destabilise us. We've heard that briefed from people within the intelligence community. And yet, again, we just sort of, you know, the successive governments sit on their hands as if there's nothing they can do about it.
It's certainly fair to say that the threats have been growing over the last 5 years. I've been calling for many years for increase in defences. It's like an insurance policy. You know, how long does it take to make these expensive platforms, even autonomous or even semi-autonomous? It takes 5 or 6 years to develop ships, planes, and jets and so forth, let alone the clever stuff that we're now seeing that's used in Ukraine. You touched on something quite important there, though, and we may disagree in how you go about it. But when we remove soft power, well-spent soft power, in places like Africa, when we absent ourselves from there, it is the Wagner Group that fills the gaps, that takes advantage of that encourages extremism, it encourages poor governance, insecurity, and that leads to greater migration, I'm afraid. So yes, we can do much as we can off the shores of Dover, but when we, along with other countries, extract ourselves from programs in difficult parts of the world and war then breaks out, we can't be surprised when those individuals eventually turn around and say, I'm not going to stay here, this is unworkable, I'm going to head to Europe, and some of those will then head to the UK as well.
Let's talk about the Tempest programme, because I was I first knew about this a couple of Fairford Air shows ago, where I went and had a look around. They had a sort of installation where you could go and see how the plane would operate. It can both be piloted and functioning as a drone. Very, very high tech. The future of airborne warfare, we were told. And yet it seems now that we're probably going to scrap this, despite a load of investment already having taken place. Why, for crying out loud?
Well, again, it all simply comes down to the money. When the British nation demands the government to spend more on defence, which they are starting to do so simply because of the conversations that you and I are now having, making it very clear what Russia is doing on a daily basis in their greater undersea cable threats and so forth, cyber attacks and so on. When it comes to Tempest, I mean, that's direct warfare against Russia, and that has not been ruled out. We've had the head of our armed forces say that that is a possibility in 5 years' time. This is where Tempest would come into its own. But if you don't give the MOD the budget it requires, it then needs to look at the very big platforms that it's spending money on, including our nuclear deterrent, and say we can't afford it. And that means our country is vulnerable. You're right to say it's state-of-the-art. It's sixth-generation fast jet, and what it can do is quite incredible. But we should also ask ourselves whether we're being clever enough to advance and procure these high-tech platforms, whether we should have a greater collaboration with America and other nations to create the assets that we need. The F-35 is a great example of countries coming together and actually producing something which is second to none. That, for me, is the way forward.
Tempest was being done with Italy and Japan, I think. But I was quite excited about it. It was nice to see British innovation front and centre. It's funny, isn't it? When it comes to net zero, they keep gaslighting us. Oh, great, the green revolution is going to create all of these jobs. No, it is costing jobs, especially in Scotland, and handing giant charity cheques over to Beijing. But when it comes to investing in defence, that actually would create a downflow of great benefit to the UK economy.
It would be. And unfortunately, the absence of this government signing the contracts, what with the Defence Investment Plan, this was this big green light to all the spending that needed to take place. And because they've sat on it for months and months and months, British businesses, defence businesses, are now going to France and Germany, Poland, where they are starting to upgrade their defence posture. But because we're dithering on this as to where to go next, as to how we upgrade, then we're not getting the contracts. We're not investing in sovereign capabilities. So all the more reason, justification as to why John Healey chose to step back.
But also, you know, you're talking about soft power earlier, creating the next generation of armaments and military assets and then selling them to third-party countries is a brilliant way of having influence, especially because, you know, if we decided we sold them tech and we didn't like the way they were using it, a lot of countries managed to put in override systems or kill switches or say, well, you can't get the latest updates unless you stay in line with our own geopolitical goals. I don't understand. We don't embrace arms manufacturing in the same way America is doing to have big international clout.
Well, we do. It's less seen. I mean, we make a lot of the innards, if you like, inside some of the very, very big platforms. We're one of the biggest arms exporters in the world. But you're right, we're not leveraging that capability, particularly with the change in the character of warfare that we're seeing coming out of Ukraine. And that goes back, I'm afraid, sorry to repeat myself, but if government doesn't invest in the companies themselves, if we don't buy the stuff ourselves, it's very difficult to get anybody else to then say, yes, I'll invest in that too, if you're not using it yourself. I would stress, though, that hard power and soft power are two sides of the same coin. You know, you can't tackle Ebola in Africa with more tanks. You can't tackle extremism, Boko Haram or Al-Shabaab, for example, you know, with more jets and so forth. And that's where clever investment in overseas aid goes well. I would be the first to say that there have been some terrible examples of where that money has absolutely been wasted. And that's partly because nobody is controlling both budgets, the hard power budget and the soft power budget. Nobody sits at the top of both to say, how can they work together? There were two different departments with nobody with overall with oversight.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, in the same way China's got Belt and Road Initiative and America once had its Marshall Programme, we could do great things by actually trading and investing in Africa rather than sending them charity checks for trans dramas and stuff like that. Tobias, thank you ever so much. Always good to catch up. Tobias Elwood there, former chair of the Defence Select Committee. Some breaking news for you before we take a breather, and that is the British artist David Hockney has died at the age of 88, probably one of our most celebrated modern artists, famous, of course, for his swimming pool paintings and the like. He has passed away at the age of 88. Right, coming up after the break, I'm going to take a breather and put my feet up and allow Peter Bleksley to do all the ranting. You don't want to miss it. Back after this.
I think the trigger for this is people
You
using
think they just did it for no reason whatsoever? You think they rioted last night for no reason?
They took to the streets last night because they were thugs who wanted to engage in violence.
What about the peaceful protesters? There were peaceful protesters all over Northern Ireland as well.
They have a right, as they always should, to protest, but there is always going to be a difference of opinion when it does come to whether it's a legal migrant or an illegal migrant, whether it's a person who has come here to seek refuge or whether it's someone who's come here to work.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Well, I'd say that we've reached beyond simmering now. Boiling point, I think, is a better description of the public mood, particularly in Northern Ireland, as police have resorted to using plastic bullets in an effort to contain riots in Northern Ireland. Let's speak now to former Met Police Detective Peter Bleksley. As much as the police might be able to clamp down and, I don't know, deter people from some appalling scenes of rioting, while I have sympathy with the public mood, and that I definitely do, I don't have any sympathy with paramilitaries setting fire to houses with people sleeping inside. And yet that is where we've reached. I mean, where does this leave policing, not just in Belfast, but the United Kingdom? I'd imagine all forces are on high alert.
Well, let me deal with brilliant Belfast and wonderful Northern Ireland first, if I may. A city that I thoroughly enjoyed only as recently as 3 weeks ago. And I urge anybody to go to Belfast, meet its people, do the tours, see the peace walls, have a look at those gates that are closed every night and then reopened in the morning, see the segregation, see the togetherness, learn about that unique province, and then you'll understand why police use tactics out there that are not used on the mainland, namely rubber bullets and water cannon, just to use two examples. Of course, the rioting that we've seen in recent nights has been absolutely disgusting, and it's unforgivable, and it really shouldn't be happening. But not only in Belfast, but throughout the UK, which I'm travelling widely at the moment, there is a huge amount of anger. And so much of it revolves around unfettered, uncontrolled immigration. We hear our politicians endlessly talking about there's not enough money to do this or to do that, how very apposite this week. And yet we find billions upon billions upon billions being spent on feeding, clothing, housing people who come illegally into this country. And before any lunatic lefty jumps up and says, oh, they're asylum seekers, they're legal, at the point of entry, if you do not have permission, or as they call it, right to remain in this country, when you enter, you commit a criminal offence under Section 3 of the Immigration Act 1971. So these people should be detained, should be put into secure facilities, and then should be removed. But it's not happening. And the anger has been building for years now, absolute years. And the dreadful attack on Monday, which I won't mention any further, obviously was a catalyst for all this disquiet on the streets of Belfast. But the politicians have got to listen. They've got to wake up and listen and not insult us with their obfuscation, their ducking the issue, their platitudes. Oh, I don't recognise the expression alien culture, etc., etc., etc. Wake up, realise the anger in the UK, because if they don't, and it breaks my heart to have to say this disquiet, this rioting is going to spread further.
And it's already being exploited by some pretty dark forces. Look, I'm not here exactly banging the leftist drum for no one should go out and protest, far from it. But what we do know, particularly in Northern Ireland, is masked men representing paramilitary outfits are turning up into the fray. We've heard of masked men chasing a nurse on her way to work. We've heard that healthcare workers have been stopped and asked to prove they were medical staff while going to the hospitals where they work, with some of them choosing to stay overnight because that's how unsafe they were. I mean, these are basically race riots, and I think we're going to see a lot more of them. But some of the darker forces now exploiting this send a shiver down my spine.
Yes, and understandably so. Of course, Belfast has a dark history in recent decades, but progress is being made. But when the division runs so deep like it does out there, these matters are not resolved in a single generation, or maybe a generation or two. It will take some time. But so many people in Belfast told me we're not going back to the dark, dark days. But clearly there are elements of people out there who do have links to former or current paramilitary organisations, and there is a massive, disgusting, racist element to what's going on.
There is indeed, and I think we're only just seeing the beginning, because the more the government sits on their hands, the worse it will get. Peter, thank you ever so much. Right, we're taking a short break. Don't go anywhere, because the brilliant James Price joins me just after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. It is a delight and an honour, a pleasure and a privilege to have your company today. I hope you're doing well wherever you are, whatever you are up to. I hope you're beginning to get in the weekend vibe as well, and I hope that part of your weekend includes spending some time with me, because I'm back and I'm going to be doing my usual 10 till 1 Saturday and Sunday as well. And delightful shows, those, very sort of relaxing at the well. You don't really get to relax that much with me, do you? But we do tend to sort of, you know, lighten it up a bit more mischievous at the weekend. But we try and have a bit of comedy as we go. Friday, however, it's hard line. Well, because you sort of get to the end of the weekly news cycle and you're pulling out your hair and you just think, I've got to get things off my chest. So that is what we do today. But it's comic relief on Saturday and Sunday, a little bit more. We do take it seriously at the same time. Anyway, just tune in and watch. If you don't normally watch, you ought to this weekend, because I think you'll like it. Let's take a voice note, shall we? This is Paul.
Morning, Alex. Paul in Burnley. The government, like any government, it's all about making choices, making decisions. And this government has chosen to go down the net zero route and not spend money on defence. So we'll go down the net zero route, but be prepared to start learning how to speak Russian.
Well, there you go. I think he's making quite a sensible point there. Not an easy language, can I just say? Even hello is zdravstvuyte or something. Yeah, no, me neither. Right, shall we join Baba-in-Chief? He's a favourite of mine, my neighbour, no less. Well, near neighbour. We're a few villages along from each other, because he made the sensible choice of getting out of Londonistan and now lives in the wonderful wilds of the West Country. What a sane man he is. That's why we have him on the programme. It's Mr James Price. How are you doing, Babs?
I'm very well, thank you. Although, of course, I have got to go into London in a little bit. So if you've got any spare Kevlar that you've left at home, let me know.
Oh, do you know what? I've just come back from Florida and I was eyeing up the pepper spray thinking, I'm really tempted. I don't even care if I get put in clink for this. Such is the nature of London right now. It's amazing, actually, in America, how many Americans are coming up to me going, oh, my goodness, you know, are you OK? What is going on in Britain? The Henry Novak story, especially among right-wing channels, went absolutely wild, as have the Belfast riots. They're all watching, thinking, what is going on in Europe? It feels like the end of days. And indeed, it does. I want to talk first of all about Kemi Badenoch, because I'm getting a bit sick and tired of her sanctimony when she goes, oh, well, it's not OK to use things, you know, these terrible atrocities to make political points and, you know, using these poor people. And Starmer does the same. The families have sold us to not... Shut up. Shut up. Stop trying to silence us. And while she's being sanctimonious, she then takes whatever opportunity she can to do exactly what she's telling people not to do. In this case, she's been blaming Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman, the two Conservatives who defected to reform. Of course, Suella Braverman was Home Secretary and Robert Jenrick the Immigration Minister underneath her. But they quit Mr Sunak's administration because he didn't want to adopt a tougher stance on migration, and yet she's taken a pot shot at them for basically enabling that vile Sudanese monster to break into our country from Ireland and attempt to behead someone.
It doesn't feel like a time for intra-right-wing party politics and stabbing at each other, does it? Metaphorically, of course. When we all know that the main targets of our ire ought to be the completely failed system and the fact that we have got millions of people who've been let in. And you can do point scoring all you want, but it's only going to help take the attention away from this rancid Labour government and from the broader system of NGOs and charities and bits of the blob that have allowed this to happen. I do worry that although it might sell newspapers, that they're kind of, oh, well, Kemi said this to Suella and Suella said this about Kemi or whatever else it may be, is going to turn people off voting for right-wing parties. And I know that there'll be people at home who have views of which of those parties are the right ones to do it. But it does seem that with the level of support for right-wing parties in general across this country and the desperate, desperate need to have a bit of law and order, to have a bit of economic growth, or lots of both, please, that this sort of sniping back and forth is unhelpful, whether it's me saying it or whether it's Kemi Badenoch saying it. Your point about Rob Jenrick quitting, of course, is a great one. The only person who actually quit and said the truth, which was that Rishi Sunak, of all people, I'll do my own bit of stabbing now, didn't take this issue seriously enough, just as we've got a Labour resignation damning the Prime Minister of the day for not doing enough. It's very rare and remarkable and very admirable when someone resigns over a point of principle, I think.
You're right about the right wing in this country essentially snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, because if you add up the right wing parties, we've comfortably got a majority. And looking at Makerfield, especially, as the prism, frankly, through which present day politics and future politics can be regarded, it is more than a little frustrating, to put it mildly, to essentially see the victory being handed on a silver platter to blimmin' Andy Burnham. Again, it's a bit like, you know, Sir Keir Starmer back in the day ahead of the general election, not really telling us anything about the policies that he was going to pursue in government. And then while they drive the country off over a cliff, everyone's going, well, we didn't realise he was going to do that. And I'm watching Makerfield thinking, great, we're going to essentially usher in an even more left-wing leader in the form of Burnham, who's then going to probably benefit from a bit of a under new management bounce in the polls. He might even decide, with that being the case, that it was the opportune time to call a snap election, because, frankly, if they leave it longer, when the chickens come home to roost and everyone realises he hasn't actually come out of some sort of miracle cure or silver bullet as new leader of the Labour Party, you sort of see the writings on the wall. And essentially, there are elements of the right wing. One particular pompous oaf springs to mind, who doesn't care that he's actually going to deny the British public what they are desperate for, which is a right-wing government.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think I could probably guess who it is that to whom you're referring there as well, Alex. I agree with you. The thing that's so frustrating is that actually, by and large, although the main proponents of the parties will deny this, actually the current policy platforms of the right in this country are pretty darn similar, regardless of which colour of rosette the proponent is saying, right? Just as I think the Reform have done a very excellent job of forcing the Conservatives to confront the catastrophic failure of immigration policy, principally the Boris wave, and an inability to deal with the ECHR stopping the small boats and things like that you and I have spoken to each other about to death. The Conservatives, I think, have done a good job of making sure that Reform are being very sensible now when it comes to economic policy. Robert Jenrick again came in and ushered out a lot of the unfunded spending privileges and pledges and things like that. And so, again, similar, because I think probably Labour are going to spend all the money and all the debt will go to the point that you haven't got any money to do anything with, and you'll be forced to do spending cuts and economic growth, which will benefit the country. But regardless, they are all similar when it comes to actual policies being announced. You might have a degree of severity or robustness in some areas, but it is purely vibes. And that's the kind of stuff that we criticised the left for so long, of talking about personalities, whereas the left have always been in lockstep, because basically it's whether you want full communism now or you want it in the future. And Andy Burnham, right, Alec, we've just got to talk about him for a second. I will tell these stories until I'm blue in the face and until you cut me off. The guy is such a fraud. He's such a phony, because he's got a bit of a northern accent that seems to change depending on whether he's sat in Liverpool or in Manchester or in anywhere else. He goes, oh, we by gum, I'm this kind of great outsider. The dude went to Cambridge. He was a parliamentary staffer from the age of about 12. He was a special advisor, just like I was. He was an MP by the time he was 25 or something. He was in the cabinet. He was actually in the cabinet, by the way, when the mid-staffs a scandal broke loose of the horrendous conditions of NHS hospitals whilst he was health secretary. And then he lost to Ed Miliband, and then he lost the leadership contest again to Jeremy Corbyn, of all people. And on the way, when he was asked by Mumsnet what his favourite biscuit was, he said, oh, I don't do that because I'm from the north. I like chips and gravy. I mean, the guy is a total joke. And if Labour think that he is going to save them, they better call that election quick if he gets in, because the public are going to see through him quicker than I can see through my pane of glass in my window there.
Well, but this is it. They should be getting absolutely trounced in a constituency like Makerfield. You know, 95% white working class demographic, voted by a big majority to leave the EU. You add the right-wing votes together and they would, you know, win it with their eyes closed. And yet that seems to not be what the future holds, because of this entity called Restore Britain, which seemingly exists only to attack reform. I don't hear them mouthing off against the Labour Party. I don't hear them attacking Andy Burnham. They never dare breathe a negative word about the Conservative Party. I wonder why. And it's interesting, isn't it, that the media establishment and the political establishment say nothing about them either. Not the fact their candidates not turned up to a single hustings or done a single interview. At the same time, they sort of play this narrative of, oh, they won't give us a platform. No, people keep inviting you onto shows. You just don't let her turn up because you don't trust what's going to come out her mouth. And then so many people are not getting this right. You made a really important point earlier, which is actually when you look at the policy portfolios of all of these entities on the right, you couldn't put a fag paper between them, quite frankly. It is pedantry about who's going to deport 10,000 more people or who can, you know, speak with the biggest cojones or gob off in the way that's the most dramatic and algorithm-friendly. And I keep hearing commentators, you know, from the media establishment say, well, you know, it's a bit like UKIP and the Tory party back in the day, stealing the lunch money. And I'm like, it's not. Because UKIP back in the day under Nigel Farage were actually pretty radically different to David Cameron's Conservative Party. You know, you really, you could, back then, you couldn't put a fag packet between David Cameron and the Labour Party. Whereas now, it's not like that at all. You know, if you were to sort of sit down and study what comes out, you know, the promises made by these various parties, you wouldn't be able to pick which one was which. And they just seem to be existing, Restore Britain, to, I don't know, mess up the right wing.
The kind of purity tests are so unhelpful, right? It'd be great to do what the left does and kind of have recriminations and blame and attack the Tories. And I'm not saying this, by the way, to try and whitewash the Conservative record. I hope that I've been more honest and more candid about the failures of the Conservative Party, including even the departments I was in when I was in them, and our inability to deal with the blob and all the rest of it than anybody else. Which is why I think you do need to have some Conservatives who'd been in and around, not that I'm pitching for a job, to be able to explain where the skeletons are buried and the kind of trapdoors that the blob will throw at people. So I'm not saying this to whitewash, but because it is existential for the future of the country. And on Rupert Lowe himself, right, it's not nothing, because, you know, a lot of people will know him from Twitter, a lot more actually from Facebook, which shows it's not just Elon Musk putting his thumbs on the scales by any means. But the thing that gets me about it is when you see Rupert Lowe talk, he sounds pretty similar to Farage, pretty similar to Kemi Badenoch, pretty similar to a lot of what I would think a kind of classic old school Thatcherite. And then you see the person who has the Rupert Lowe account on Twitter, and it's kind of foaming at the mouth, you know, really hardcore stuff. And again, I don't necessarily disagree with it, but it's clearly not the same person, and it contradicts each other. When Rupert Lowe says things like, no, I wouldn't take passports off anybody, and then on Twitter it's, yeah, don't care, going to burn the passports, or whatever else it may be. It does just seem a little bit odd that people haven't managed to put these things together and realise there's a disconnect, at the very least, between them. But I guess now I'm guilty of doing what I accused others of doing, of meddling in the kind of the party politics a bit, when the fundamentals are the country just lost a defence secretary yesterday, and for many hours we didn't have anybody who was there in case something happened in Ukraine, in case something happened in Iran, in case there was an attack, in case you needed to sign off special forces to go and do something around the world. All because Keir Starmer is the most awful Prime Minister we have ever had, maybe until Burnham comes along in a few weeks, and left the country totally and utterly defenceless, not in my words, but in the words of several defence ministers who all resigned yesterday. And yet on the right, we seem to be worried about these purity tests. We've got to get our act together to save the country.
It's a psyop. It's always been a psyop until people actually... I mean, come on, can't they see it for what it is? There's a reason why the left wing aren't saying anything about the mad rhetoric. There's a reason the Conservative Party aren't saying anything about this other competition on the right wing. There's a reason why they're only knocking on the doors of people who've put on reform posters. There's a reason why that X account, all it seems to do is lambast Nigel Farage and reform. There's a reason, my friends, and the reason is because they don't want you to have what you want. They don't want you to have a right-wing government controlling immigration. They've got to wreck it. They've got to stop it somehow. And that is what this entity exists to do. And it is there as clear as day. But sadly, there are people who are just unwilling to see it. And I get it. I actually get why people are. Because when people feel like all of a sudden there's a salvation, they've been drawn in by the tough talking, and they've really felt for the, finally there's, someone who believes as passionately and desperately economy and the crisis of this country and how to change it, and you've wedded yourself to it emotionally, it's really difficult then when someone like me says it ain't real. And I'm not accusing people who have gone down that route or followed them. It's not their fault that they've been duped by this, and there's no shame and there's no guilt in the fact that they are being taken for a ride. I just wish they realised they were being taken for a ride and said, blimey, I shouldn't let that happen to me. That's all I would say. I'm not blaming people who have been caught up in the, you know, furore of it all. That is human emotion, and we're all desperately worried about the nation's future. So there's no shame and no blame in, you know, if that is you. But please just see it for what it is what I would say.
I think Alex, it's really important as well to remember when Corbyn came in 2015, and he and his sort of, you know, weirdy-beardy types all came in, and they all said that he was the magic grandpa and the saviour and all these things. Oh, it's going to be so much easier, another world is possible, all this stuff. And people drank the Kool-Aid there big time on it. And it took sort of sensible Labour voices to say, actually things are a bit more complicated than that. You can't blame us of not having tried turning on the spending taps under New Labour in the noughties. It doesn't work to fix things. And if people come and sell you that they've got, it's all going to be very easy and we're going to win easy and we're going to be able to just deport everybody straight away and all this kind of stuff, it's very complicated. And when you think people have now seen a lot of footage from the United States of America where Trump had this big package for the ICE agents and all this stuff, and the nasty footage that's come out, you think you're going to be able to do that level of stuff here in Britain where people are very squeamish because they're decent people and they don't want to see, you know, crying faces on their telly because we're very empathetic and all the rest of it. You're going to have to do an awful lot of actually quite boring slogging work if we're talking about deportations and things like that, which seems to be the cause célèbre on the right. You have to do an awful lot about people's welfare payments and things like that, or it's going to get bogged down in the courts forever. And you say, oh, Price is such a wet now, he's gone soft, rah, rah, rah. It's nothing to do with that. But government is very difficult when you've got decades and decades of an all-powerful civil service and charity kind of coalition against you. And if anyone tells you it's going to be easy to do any of the reforms we need to fix the country, they're wrong. They're lying to you. No, exactly. And it's only going to be done with a very willing and obliging big majority in Parliament, because otherwise, like you said, the opprobrium that's going to come from the media, the establishment, the NGOs, the leftists with their placards, polite society. Isn't it sad? You know, poor old if Fatima was taken from her home and she came over here 5 years ago and all she ever wanted was, you know what I mean? It's going to be the whole lot of it. Mawkish reactions on top of extremely disciplined, focused and relentless lawfare, I'd imagine. So unless we actually manage to have someone in there who's done all the planning, written the legislation, got the legal advice, got people with experience, so that does mean people from the Conservative Party who've actually been around the block a few times and know how Whitehall works, who've written up in detail an agenda of how they're going to deliver this, and then manage, it's a lot of, you know, ifs and buts and conditions, then manage to get over the finish line with a significant majority. Nothing's going to change, and I think people have got to understand that. Let's talk now about this blimmin' ridiculous story. This stuff just makes me feel ill. Apparently, English councils, and this is particularly Birmingham City Council, quelle surprise, talking about people taking part in illegal family voting. Why do we have to call it blimmin' family voting? It's not family voting, it's corruption. It's electoral fraud, it's manipulation, it is oppression of women by a particular community. Family voting, my backside. Look, you can just do an easy thought experiment with this stuff, right? And I encourage everybody to do it. Every time you hear a story like this and you see the left coming up and trying to defend it or justify it or say it's not happening, change it around. And if in case it wasn't sort of recent arrivals or maybe people who've only been here from a generation or so ago, probably from Pakistan, based on some of the reportage I've seen on this, in replace it being the kind of the old bearded family patriarch and his wife or wives saying, as has happened to me when I've knocked on doors and said, you know, would you consider voting Conservative, as I've done in the past elections? And they go, oh no, my husband husband takes care of that, if they speak English at all. Replace that image with the image of Sir Colonel Tufton Bufton in his tweed jacket, snatching the postal vote from his poor, suffering wife and children, and would the left still defend the kind of principle there? No, of course they wouldn't. They're only doing it because they think they benefit from it, and they think that any criticisms of other cultures in this country, the fact that other cultures in the country itself is a terrible thing that the left seeks to defend, they don't care about the principle of this stuff. They only care about winning power. And it's not just the left in Britain. You can see the travesty of what's happening in California at the moment, where an insurgent guy who just said, I just don't want the naked drug addicts to be pooing outside of schools anymore. He looked like he was going to get through to the knockout round on the day, and they'd magically found loads and loads and loads of votes somewhere in the ballots that have been counted for weeks for the mad communist, who was crying on election night like she knew that she'd lost, and suddenly they found votes there as well. The left doesn't care about democracy, they don't care about principles, Alex, as you know, they just want the power for themselves.
Before I let you go, very quickly, I've got to cover this one with you because I want to hear your thoughts on it. Apparently, various councils are warning England flags not to hang St George's Cross flags because it doesn't create a welcoming and cohesive community feel for us poor beatified migrants out there. Bristol, Kelso-Prees, South Gloucestershire, Kelso-Prees, but then these two, Wiltshire and Shropshire. Wiltshire? Come on, pull your socks up. Wiltshire's home to lots of military bases. They're urging locals not to put flags on lampposts. I've just come back from America. You can't swing a cat in Florida for want of seeing the stars and stripes hanging off every single lamppost and public building, and it's great. I mean, for crying out loud, it's a World Cup.
Absolutely astonishing. Well, but maybe Lady Nugie, otherwise known as Emily Thornberry, the Labour matriarch MP, will be offended. You remember this 12 years ago?
Oh, I
the
do.
Rochester and Strood by-election? I think she lost her shadow job under Ed Miliband because she was sneering at a house that dared to put the St George's Cross up. So you've inspired me now, Alex. I'm just across the border from Wiltshire. I will go and buy the biggest St George's Cross I can, and as we've got the 4th of July coming up, I'll get Old Glory, the Stars and Stripes up just to upset everybody as well. How about that?
Oh, let's do it together. We'll like sit off on a car together. We'll make a nice day out of it, shall we, next week?
Raise the colours, as that campaign said, very proudly. There was another Labour MP, wasn't there, Jeevan Sander, who went round saying, take these down because it upsets and offends people. Like, mate, grow up. You call the people who were obsessed about Brexit, I'm not sure you can say this on the telly, but there was the insult of calling us flag shaggers. But these are the people that get obsessed with it and paint the EU flag on their faces and adorn their Twitter accounts with it. Grow a pair.
Oh, well, you know, just down the road from us, you drive into Stroud and Dale Vince has put that girt blimmin' pro-Pally flag, that massive thing on the whole side of Ecotricity. I'm not sure how that's escaped planning permission. Blimmin' vile.
It's bonkers, isn't it? And don't forget that there isn't even the old school Pride flag, which is a sort of almost rainbow of 6 colours, that now has different chevrons in it, people will have seen, to have to other different identities and things. And the weirdest thing about that one, if you've seen it, there's sort of arrows that go along. I've got no problem with the regular Pride flag, rainbows, lovely, pretty, great stuff. But they've put black and brown chevrons in there to represent people of those skin colours. I think if I were a regular like British black person or something like that, what is this all about? Why are you trying to say that I've got to be this weird alternative lifestyle of the trans that goes in there as well and all the rest of it, and lumping these people together against the majority? We should be trying to find that which unites us, which we have more in common, and stop things that divide us. And by the way, the St George's Cross and the Union Jack is the flag that unites everybody who lives in this country and cares about this country and cares about our traditions and our values. That is the flag that secured freedom around the world, and that's the flag that we should proudly fly.
Well said, that man. Beautifully put. I love you to bits, Babs. Right, the brilliant James Price, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to be refocusing our attention back on the riots in Belfast as it's discovered police have been firing plastic bullets. In a bid to contain those race riots, we're going to be speaking to a DUP MLA for North Antrim pull-through just after this.
I think the trigger for this is people
You
using
think they just did it for no reason whatsoever? You think they rioted last night for no reason?
They took to the streets last night because they were thugs who wanted to engage in violence.
What about the peaceful protesters? There were peaceful protesters all over Northern Ireland as well.
They have a right, as they always should, to protest, but there is always going to be a difference of opinion when it does come to whether it's a legal migrant or an illegal migrant, whether it's a person who has come here to seek refuge or whether it's someone who's come here to work.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Well, you'd have had to be living under a rock to escape the dramatic scenes that have engulfed Belfast ever since that shock attempted beheading by a Sudanese migrant. Understandably, the people of Belfast appalled at yet another violent crime being perpetrated at the hands of somebody who should not be in this country. And utterly appalling video for anybody who watched it. Blood-curdling, violent, horrific, terrifying. Of course, the answer is not to then go and set fire to houses with people living in, or set up checkpoints where anybody with non-white skin has to sort of essentially show their papers to prove that they're going to work in a hospital. And yet Northern Ireland has descended into something looking a little like that. I'm not blaming people for being angry at what is going on in their city, in their country. I actually have complete sympathy with the fact that almost everybody now is at their wits' end, that people feel desperate. And it doesn't surprise me that opportunists like paramilitaries are using this as a way to wreak havoc in their communities. Let's speak now to Paul Frew, who's a DUP MLA for North Antrim. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Paul. Tell me, what is the mood like at the moment in Northern Ireland? Are things beginning to calm down a bit?
Well, Alex, the mood is quite tense. There's a lot of concern about, there's a lot of anger about, and that manifests itself out on the streets with regards to protests. And people, of course, have the right to protest about this really serious matter of immigration and asylum and the processes that are meant to be in place to protect the citizens of the United Kingdom. That, of course, spelled out into violence, and I would condemn the violence completely and utterly. Some people have used that as an excuse to go out and riot. People have taken advantage of that and exploited that tense scenario out on the streets, and I would condemn that violence and call it to stop, because it's taking away from the actual real issue here. The worst fears of people have been realised in Northern Ireland, but it's right across the UK. And it's really important that we have an asylum system and an immigration system that have rules and balances and checks that keep our people safe. And our worst fears have been realised. We now know that that is not the case and that we need to tighten this up dramatically.
How bad is the situation in Belfast as a city? Because, you know, certainly you can look at certain towns and cities across the UK that really have become flashpoints and hotspots for illegal migration, for migrant crimes, for this sense of ghettoised communities. What is the picture like in Belfast?
We keep hearing stats about Northern Ireland being the most white place in the United Kingdom. And for many, many avenues and streets, that bears true. But for people in some areas of Belfast, and even in my own area of North Antrim and Ballymena here, you have real concentrated pockets of environments where there is a massive percentage of newcomers newcomer families into that area for whatever reason, through whatever guise. Could be immigration, illegal immigration, asylum. And what happens there then, I think, is that those communities are forgotten about and they're just left to their own devices. And we see real challenges in those areas. So in those concentrated pockets, if 50% or over can't or don't speak English as their first language, if they don't have access to healthcare, if they don't have access to proper homes, if they don't have access to a vehicle or a car, so there's no mobility, there's real challenges then in those areas and then on surrounding areas around that specific area. And nobody really cares. It seems that nobody really cares and that nobody really wants to really take a concentrated view and put in concentrated, orchestrated support into those areas. And then that's why these things bubble over as they do into protest.
I mean, what's interesting, perhaps, the sort of positive, if one can call it that, and, in a very dark situation indeed, is the fact that this is an issue that unites people who once upon a time were firm foes.
Northern Ireland has its own unique history and the Troubles, and I lived through the Troubles. I grew up in the Troubles. My father was targeted simply because he was a lorry driver and he would have been throwing stones into a building site that just happened to be an army camp or a police station. So there have been real challenges in the past in my lifetime in Northern Ireland, but I think there's a fear here that goes right across the spectrum. All peoples who have been affected or see this with their eyes, changes in their lifetime, changes in the last 15, 20 years, changes in the last 5 years. And that manifests itself. We see that visually in our working class areas and some of these pockets where there's been concentration of newcomer families. Some are here to work hard and they get on with life and they really do integrate into society and into those communities very, very well, and they add something to those communities. But then the worst fears have been realised this week, whereby the government doesn't really know how many people are in the UK illegally. They don't really know where all these asylum seekers are, whether they've been through the process and stayed within the rules. And what's really worrying people now is that this awareness now of this fast tracking in 2023, which allowed more people to come in. It looked as if they were being ushered in, pushed through, just to basically diminish backlogs. Then that's not security, and that's not sticking to rules, and that's not having a proper asylum system or immigration system. So our worst fears have been realised, but it's not just Northern Ireland this will affect every part of the UK.
No, and many, many parts of Western Europe as well. I think we're going to be in for a long and hot summer, that's for sure. Paul, thank you ever so much for joining me this morning. OK, we're going to take a short break, but remember, you can have your thoughts read out on air should you wish to send me a message. 0344 499 1000 is the number to send something to WhatsApp. 87222 is the number to send a text like the word talk before your message if you're going to do that. And of course, if you'd like to speak to me on the blower a bit later, we are going to be doing calls in the last segment of this hour. So you can register your interest now with the wonderful Kieran, who's poised, ready to take down your details. 0344 499 1000 is your normal network rate. OK, we're going to be taking a short break and then we're going to return to the subject of the big resignations of John Healey and Al Carnes with this government's woeful underfunding of defence. I mean, that's pretty much putting it mildly. A lot to discuss there. We're going to be joined by Shadow Defence Minister Mark Francois after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk. Oh.
Hello and welcome back, and goodbye, it seems, to John Healey and Al Carnes. Voluntarily, that is, because they have stepped down from their cabinet's positions, and by goodness, John Healey didn't hold back with his resignation letter. And understandably, because it is quite clear that the government, or particularly Rachel Reeves, has made choices not to defend the realm, but instead splurge in a very self-indulgent way. Or is it self-indulgent? Because it's us that they're taking the money from. To, I don't know, fund a load of foreigners claiming benefits, allow people to not work and just have oodles of children. But whatever you do, better not fund defence. That's far too manly and mean, isn't it? Well, it turns out that Danish intelligence services have shared information about the amount of infrastructure that Putin is building along the frontiers of NATO, whether that be Finland, Norway, Estonia. He's building accommodation for tens of thousands of troops. He's got tanks parked just across the borders of our allies. This is not the time to be weak-willed or whimsical about the state of geopolitics and the threats to our realm. And yet it seems to me either Starmer has absolutely no spine and does everything that that madwoman Rachel Reeves tells him to do, or he believes in what she believes, which is actually, it's perfectly fine to make the country vulnerable, to have it overrun by foreigners. Nah, forget all that. What is worth saving after all? We're just a racist, colonising, evil little outpost of a forgotten empire anyway. Let's speak to Mark Francois, MP, Shadow Defence Minister. I mean, Mark, 0.08%, that's basically nothing. They're not putting any extra into defence, and yet there he is. Just last week, he was there inviting Zelensky over, pigeon-chested, you know, posturing all about how we've got to do everything we can to help Ukraine. Turns out he doesn't take defence seriously at all.
No, I mean, to paraphrase Lady Bracknell, to lose one defence minister is unfortunate. To lose two sounds like carelessness. John Healey was very well respected in the House of Commons. So's Al Carnes. They know what they're talking about. And the point of the Defence Investment Plan, the thing they've ultimately resigned over, which still hasn't been published, is that this was meant to fund the Strategic Defence Review that Labour published a year ago. So they published the review, which has a lot of good in it, but said how we're going to pay for it will follow in this thing called the Defence Investment Plan. We were promised it in the autumn. We were faithfully promised it by Christmas. We were absolutely going to have it by the new year. And here we are in the middle of June and it still hasn't been published. And Healey's resigned ultimately because he knows the money that the Treasury are offering to implement that SDR won't even touch the sides. So Labour are completely failing to fund their own plan for the defence of the nation, and that's why they've lost two good, honourable defence ministers on the same day. That's the bottom line of it.
How critical do you think our situation is in defence? Because in John Healey's resignation letter, he actually says, you spelled out threats last week. It is our intelligence assessment and the assessment of other countries in NATO that there could be an attack by Russia on NATO as soon as 2030. Well, that's 3.5 years away. That's pretty much when this government is going to serve until. It seems to me if Putin did decide he wanted to formulate some sort of aggressive attack on the United Kingdom, we got nothing to defend ourselves with.
Well, we do have armed forces, and they're still man for man, woman for woman, some of the best in the world, but they need the equipment to fight with. The Chief of the General Staff, General Sir Rowley Walker, so the professional head of the British Army, said last year we might have to fight Russia by 2027. Sir Gwyn Jenkins, the First Sea Lord, the professional head of the Royal Navy, said it might be 2029. So our military chiefs, you know, professionals are telling us we might have to fight Russia within a couple of years or so. The Strategic Defence Review says it might be 2035. Either way, the reason these two honourable men have gone is because Labour won't fund our rearmament. Now, NATO now has a thing, a sort of readiness index of how rapidly NATO members are rearming and how ready they are to fight at short notice. We are 31st out of 32 nations on that league table, and the only people below us are Iceland, and they don't have any armed forces. That's how serious this is. So Starmer talks a great game about defending the country, but he doesn't actually play one. And it's worse because in this financial year, for all their talk about boosting defence spending, they're lying. And I don't use that word lightly. They're lying. And the reason they're lying is because in this financial year, they've got an in-year efficiency savings programme at the MOD imposed on them by the Treasury to reduce day-to-day spending, including on operations and training, by £3.5 billion. Last year, Reeves's target was 2.6 billion. This year, she's increased it. So what that means is they're claiming to be increasing defence spending, but in terms of the money they're actually giving to the armed forces, they're cutting it this year by £3.5 billion. So they speak with forked tongue.
Oh, that they do. And tell me, why, after years of Tempest being in development, this is a sort of fascinating hybrid aircraft which can be both piloted and operated remotely. Why on earth are they going to potentially scrap it now when so much work's already gone into it? And it's also supposed to be the next generation of fighter aircraft.
Yes, so Tempest is what's called a sixth-generation fighter, and its job is to replace the RAF's Typhoons, which are still a very good aircraft, but getting a bit long in the tooth. And we're involved in a three-way collaborative programme with Italy and Japan to develop this aircraft. Now, the Japanese have a particularly urgent requirement because their aircraft are even older than ours, and their target is the Tempest must be flying and ready to fight in operation by 2035, and they're ready to fully fund it. The Italians are ready to fully fund it, and the government here has been eking this out with like 3 months' money at a time, and the Japanese Prime Minister's due in town very shortly, and whilst the Japanese are normally very polite, in private, apparently they're absolutely furious that we've signed up for this programme, but we now won't fund it. If we don't go ahead with the Tempest, it would be a serious blow to the Royal Air Force.
As they should be furious as well after years of collaboration. And we are some of the best. We've got some of the leading universities in the world for developing this sort of technology, and it is much needed as the nature of warfare changes quite drastically. Well, I hope there is a rethink, but, you know, given this atrocious government, I ain't gonna count on it. Mark...
If I may, just quickly. I mean, you said it yourself. I mean, my father was a D-Day veteran, right? He drummed into me that the first duty of government, above any other government, is the defence of the realm, OK? And Labour, well, Reeves and Starmer don't understand that. Rachel Reeves, as Chancellor, has no record of any empathy for the armed forces. She doesn't really understand them. She doesn't know what makes them tick, and she won't fund them. So you cannot have a situation where you've got a Prime Minister and a Chancellor saying out of one side of their mouth that they're going to increase funding for defence by the biggest amount since the Cold War, and out of the other side of their mouth, they're actually cutting it in year by £3.5 billion. There's no other word for it. They are lying.
Yeah. Well, it's we're very much in a precarious position now as a result. Let's see what happens in the wake of Healy's resignation. But like I said, I never expect this government to suddenly change their radical ideology. Mark, thank you ever so much for joining us today. Mark Francois MP, Shadow Defence Minister there. We are going to be taking calls after this next advert break, so that could well include you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to dial. I'm really looking forward to having a chit-chat with some of you and reading some more messages. If you want to send a message, it's 0344 499 1000 to send me something on WhatsApp, albeit it's written or recorded voice. 87222 is the number if you'd like to send a text message. Write the word talk before you text. I am back just after this.
I think the trigger for this is people.
You think they just did it for no reason whatsoever? Do you think they rioted last night for no reason?
They took to the streets last night because they were thugs who wanted to engage in violence.
What about the peaceful protesters? There were peaceful protesters all over Northern Ireland as well.
They have a right, as they always should, to protest, but there is always going to be a difference of opinion when it does come to whether it's a legal migrant or an illegal migrant, whether it's a person who has come here to seek refuge or whether it's someone who's come here to work.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. Righto, let's do some messages, shall we? And then hopefully we'll have a bit of a chit-chatteroo as well. If you want to join me, the number is 0344 499 1000, normal network rate. Great rant, Alex. Andy from Warwick says. That was a few hours ago now. I had a few things to get off my chest while I was on holiday, and I sort of pent it all up just for you guys. Personally, I think the King should be held accountable now for letting this government destroy the country and failing to protect its citizens, as the spineless Prime Minister keeps telling us it's the main priority of a government. General election required ASAP. Keep up the good work, Alex. Thing is, though, this whole idea that we could hold the King accountable, you know, it's protocol in this country for the King not to intervene in politics. Although I tell you what, in my darkest fantasies, wouldn't it be quite a scene? Not that I'm encouraging this. Caveat, dear Ofcom. Wouldn't it be quite a scene to see the heads of the armed forces, the head of the Navy and the Army and the RAF march into Parliament? Oh, maybe I spent too much time living in Africa. Right, I think we might be approaching the point where a critical mass of people decide that they cannot afford to wait for a general election and decide to physically remove the government. It depends on how frequent and horrific are the coming atrocities on the streets of Britain. Of course, if it does come to the people moving against the government, the Prime Minister will try to bring in the armed forces to quell the insurrection. What armed forces? If that happens, I hope those armed forces only agree on the basis that an immediate general election is called. I've never known the country to be in this state. This is the thing. I wonder how many men and women in our military are happy to serve under this government, given that the government essentially has thrown them under the bus. Keep your thoughts coming in. 0344 499 1000. Let's do a couple more messages, and I really would love to hear from you, so do give me a call today. Here's what keeps me up at night, says Ash in Essex. Martin Luther King was against the mainstream. They called him a troublemaker, an agitator, a threat to public order. Nelson Mandela was against the mainstream. 27 years in prison. The comfortable consensus called him a terrorist. Gandhi, the suffragettes, Wilberforce, again and again. The people who turned out to be right, undeniably right, were the ones the establishment tried hardest to silence. So how the hell have we ended up back here? How does a country that teaches those names in schools as heroes, as proof that standing against the crowd can be the right thing to do, turn around and rebuild the exact same machine that tried to silence them, just with new targets and a different vocabulary? If you can't see that contradiction, look harder, because it's not subtle. Free society collapses when you cannot challenge or be challenged in return. And Thrilling Commentary says, Alex, great show, even if everything else is dire. Well, there you are. At least there's some sucker for somebody out there. Alex, the Germans and French cancelled their 6th-generation plane, so another export opportunity lost by Labour. I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? We keep being told how the Green Revolution is going to create all of these jobs, and it does not. But the thing is, a revolution in defence does exactly that. Oh, well, the left know that, don't they? They call it the industrial complex, the military-industrial complex. So they know full well that it could generate a lot of GDP for this nation and give us hard power and give us soft power and give us confidence to be able to defend ourselves and give reassurance to our troops who put their lives on their line when they go out on active duty. But no, it's not in their ideology. These mad Fabians who seem to think that the world is all about globalising everything, globalising the economy, globalising welfare, globalising the blimmin' intifada. Where have we ended up? It really does feel like we're on the brink of despair, I must say. But, Alex, don't forget, most of the increases in defence spending will actually go on national insurance and pensions increases. Yes, I know. I was speaking to a good friend of mine, Graham, earlier, who's saying a lot of money that's going into defence is going to have to go to these pensions. But I didn't think about the increases in employers' national insurance. It's just sort of fake news money, really, isn't it? It's the sort of ever-evolving doom loop of a non-functioning economy. No money for operations for the Navy. Well, blimmin' Ed Miliband has an armada of boats burning thousands of tonnes of fossil fuel every day. To stick up subsidised windmills. Well, there you go. It's right. And, you know, when he talks about, what's it, what green agenda? What was it called? Green New Deal. That was it. The Green New Deal. I remember when I was in the European Parliament, they kept banging on about the Green New Deal. Well, the New Deal for who? For Beijing? It ain't a deal for us, is it? Hardly. Anyway, talking about battles, let's speak to Jeff, who's in Hastings. Hi there, Jeff.
Hello, Alex. Good morning to everyone there. You know what? Your show covers just about everything, and I can't honestly keep up with it. But my little point, relating back to what you spoke about earlier, about, you know, like the spending on military defence for this country. Well, if I was in power now, I would stop the boats, save us a lot of money, clean out England, get it back to somewhat how it should be, and then with the money you save from the immigration and all that nonsense, build up the defence. We're not in any trouble yet. And as one of your presenters said ages ago, you know, why would they want to attack this country? There's nothing here. So, you know, I just wondered, you know, you can ask me any questions you like on it, but that's my theory.
You see, this is the thing. They tell you that there's nothing here, don't they? But of course there's stuff here. Did you know we got rare earth minerals? We could frack for a load of gas if we wanted to. We've still got oil and gas in the North Sea. And as an island, we're very strategically located in the Atlantic. You know, go west and you get to America, go east and you get to Europe. Far from having nothing here, we're a country with rude amounts of resources. We're just not allowed to touch them.
Well, you know what, Alex, there's something I did want to say. It's probably off the radar with your show today, but the reason I feel that they won't use the North Sea oil is because England has a very cunning plan of they import stuff for, let's just say, £2 and sell it to the British for £8. And that's because it's import duty on the taxes. So if you're actually digging up oil or, you know, siphoning it from the sea in our land, there would be no income tax, which means certain people would say, well, you can't tax the British on that because it's from England. Do you get my point with that one?
That's very interesting. I didn't know that as a little caveat there. Very fascinating indeed. Thank you for that, Jeff. I've learned a thing or two. I'm going to look into that. That's a very interesting point. Let's speak quickly to Chris, who's in Albury. Hello, Chris. Good morning, just about.
Good morning, Alex. Nice to see you again. You've covered just about everything I was about to say regarding the defence spending. But the money that's spent like on the Ukraine and has been spent for a few years now. And you've also covered, well, not covered yet, the Chagos Islands out. Starmer wants to spend like 39 billion. Now, where's all this money coming from? This money could be transferred back into the defences. And as your last caller said, we're sitting on all these natural resources and rare minerals, etc. There's so much could be done to get this country up and running and back. And I've said for a long, long time, these migrants should be detained from day one. Then you wouldn't have the Henry Novak cases, you wouldn't have the Steve Algerville cases like in Belfast. It's time to, this government's got to go. It's time to get this country back on to par again, to what it used to be prior to the 2000s, prior to Blair. This is where a lot of it comes down to.
Yeah, you're right there. I mean, the rot set in a long time ago when we first started importing woke leftist ideology and made it the centrepiece of the national psyche. And it's eating us alive. It's cannibalising us from the inside out. You're absolutely right about that. And it is terrifying to see it happen. Chris, thank you. It's always good to speak to a regular. That's a brilliant Chris in Albury. If you want to be like Jeff and Chris and have a chat to me later on in the show, then please register your interest with Kieran. The number is 0344 499 1000. 8722 is the number to text. Write the word talk before you text. Before I go, David in Canterbury says this. It's brilliant. I'm happy to live in a society in which there are questions that can't be answered. What worries me is that I now seem to live in a society in which there are answers that cannot be questioned. Brilliantly put. I'm going to nick that. Right, we're joined by the elections guru, Sir John Curtis, after this to tell us all about Makerfield. So don't go anywhere. I will see you after this short break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello Hello there and welcome back to the show. We're now in the final hour and there is a lot to talk about today. We live in very political, febrile times, it seems. Could we have a change of Prime Minister? Well, certainly the two resignations from Cabinet suggest that things are definitely not looking good for Sir Keir Starmer. And a lot of that hinges upon the result in Makerfield, probably one of the most important historic by-elections we've seen in generations. What is going on there? And then in this febrile atmosphere of people very uncomfortable about things such as immigration and multiculturalism, we also find out that Birmingham City Council has admitted that they had election agents watching people essentially break the law with so-called family voting. How rife is fraud in the electoral system? Is it just family voting or is it still gripping the postal vote as well? Someone who might have an answer to some of those questions is the brilliant Sir John Curtis. He is, of course, polling expert, guru of elections, psophologist-in-chief, professor of politics at the University of Strathclyde. John, it's always an honour to have you on the programme. Let us start, first of all, with so-called family voting. This is Birmingham City Council, which has revealed that those supervising voting were subjected to verbal abuse, even aggressive behaviour when they intervened after seeing groups of people trying to go into polling booths together. Now, as someone who's spent a number of previous years working in elections, I'm well aware of funny goings-on with the postal vote. How compromised do you think our electoral system is? How often do we see cases of electoral fraud in the United Kingdom?
Well, let's row back slightly, Alex. Family voting doesn't necessarily equal electoral fraud, and it doesn't necessarily tell you anything about the postal vote. This was a subject that got a certain amount of publicity in the wake of a statement made by an organisation called Democracy Volunteers, which does a lot of electoral observation, not just in the UK, but across the world, saying that they found a rather lot of family voting in the Gorton and Denton by-election. But they didn't actually say much more than that at the time, and they have subsequently admitted that they probably were unwise to have put that information out, well, having spent much more time analysing the data they had collected. They've certainly also, crucially, by the way, indicated that their definition of family voting is not necessarily one that would mean that a legal threshold had been crossed. Now, what are we talking about here? We're talking about the fact that people going to polling stations and going into a polling booth at a polling station, they're meant to go in individually. And unless you have registered as somebody who needs support, so for example, if you have poor sight, you can say you are somebody who needs support. Unless you've registered that, then basically somebody shouldn't come in with you. Now, the truth is, well, actually, one of the things we see quite a lot of, and sometimes we think is quite a good idea, is that parents with a child with them might take them into the polling booth with them to show you how democracy works. Strictly speaking, that shouldn't happen, but I don't think anybody raises much of an eyebrow. And of course, what certainly, however, sometimes may well be true is that people not realising that if they need support to vote, they need to register their need in advance. Or indeed, just people go as a family occasion, man and wife, go out, whatever, to go to a polling station. Yeah, well, we'll just go in together. Now, the truth is, yeah, in those circumstances, they are meant to be advised that they shouldn't do that. Now, the story, if you read it more closely in the Daily Mail, says in most instances when the people in charge of polling stations were pointing out they couldn't do this, people accepted what they said and they went off and did it separately, but that there was a minority of instances where there was aggressive behaviour, and that clearly is regrettable, and we should regard people who are running polling stations as people who are doing a very, very valuable civic duty, and their instructions should be followed. But how big the extent to which we actually know whether or not there is any evidence that when two people get together, one of them is telling the other one how to vote. Well, it's a suspicion, but it's frankly no more than a suspicion as to how much of a problem this actually is.
Yeah, interesting. Let's talk now about the Makerfield by-election and talk about sort of, potential Westminster polling at large in case we did end up with a new Prime Minister who then decided to do a snap election while, under new management bounce. But from your read, it's very difficult in a by-election to really get a good sense from on the ground of what is going on. Sample sizes are somewhat limited. But where do you think things stand at present? Because I've heard varying reports that actually it's very tight at the top. It's very much a two-horse race. Other reports are suggesting that Labour pretty much have it done and dusted.
Well, I guess I'm tempted to say to you, Alex, that rumour loves a vacuum. And given all that we've had so far in terms of published polling, at least, as opposed to leaks of alleged polling, which have, as yet no further details have emerged, is that we've had two polls where just 500 people were interviewed. One of them showed Labour 3 points ahead. The other one showed they were 10 points ahead. The particular point of interest was that Rupert Lowe's party, Restore Britain, were apparently getting 7 or 8% of the vote, much of it coming from people who voted for reform in the constituency in 2024, and that perhaps this could end up being a crucial difference in terms of whether or not Labour or Reform won. This is a very difficult gig for Andy Burnham. It's a constituency where 2/3 of people voted Leave back in 2016, and support for reform is very heavily concentrated amongst Leave voters. Half of them are now backing reform. And the truth is, if it were anybody other than Andy Burnham fighting this seat, we would expect reform to win it fairly comfortably. But as Manchester Mayor, Andy Burnham has demonstrated a quite marked ability to perform much better than his party. And this polling that suggests that indeed, it is a two-horse race between Labour and Reform, with Labour with a chance of winning, is further testament to that. I mean, at the moment, I would say to you, on the very limited evidence we've got, yep, Labour are the favourites, but they're not in any sense an odds-on favourite. Maybe they've got a 2-to-1 chance, etc. But at the end of the day, none of us really knows. The constituency polling is difficult to do. And whether or not these Survation polls are on the money, well, we'll find out we'll find out by a week today.
But you think there's credence in the idea that Restore Britain could be a wrecking ball specifically for reform? It seems their campaign is focused entirely upon trying to take voters from reform and get them onto their side. How much power do you think they have? Because their team have been very vocal, saying it's going to be a revolution. Everyone's going to be shocked by how well we do. I'm hearing other reports of people saying, well, probably isn't going to be as big as all of that. But is there a very good chance that it could essentially be the device which propels Andy Burnham into number 10?
Yeah, that is a not implausible scenario. I mean, the Survation polling data, let alone the so-called private data, suggests that Restore Britain might get 7 or 8% now in the opinion polls. And it's only YouGov so far who are polling, and including Restore Britain in their numbers. They're tending to get 3% in their weekly polls, which, by the way, is a lot more than Jeremy Corbyn's U Party are getting. It doesn't suggest that Restore Britain are on course to further seriously fragment our already heavily fragmented politics. But within this constituency, those two limited polls we've got have said 7 or 8%. And if they are right, given that it seems unlikely that Andy Burnham, if he does win, is going to win by a country mile, maybe we will conclude that Restore Britain have made the difference. But of course, it's a big difference between scuppering a party whose views is not that dissimilar to your own, their chances of winning, against a party with a very different outlook from both Reform and Restore Britain. It's one thing to do that. It's another to demonstrate that Restore Britain are going indeed to be a major force in the UK. Certainly in the local elections, Reform managed to demonstrate they could find candidates for virtually every seat that was up for elections, over 5,000 of them. That was a quite considerable achievement. Restore Britain, in comparison, only fought a handful.
I've heard various media commentators sort of talk about Restore Britain in the same through the same framework as the role UKIP played with the Conservative Party about 10 years ago. But I would hesitate to compare the two because, much like you said, I think sort of under the David Cameron stewardship of the Conservative Party, UKIP represented something quite politically distinct back then. Whereas it seems to me Restore and Reform, if you were to look at on paper what they advocate, you couldn't put a fag paper between them. It's just, let's say, a difference in style and rhetoric.
but sometimes the animosity between the People's Front of Judea and the Judea People's Front is more intense than that between people who are politically very, very different from each other.
No, very true. There doesn't seem to be much love lost between the two. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And, of course, if there were to be, let's say Andy Burnham, let's project it. Let's say he does somehow, he wins Makerfield, and then he launches a leadership contest against Sir Keir Starmer, which everyone thinks is sort of hands down that's going to happen. It's then under, you know, Labour Party, under new management. They get a bounce in support as a result of that. And he thinks, well, you know what, probably best to call an election now rather than wait too long as the machine continues to crumble. How might we look?
Okay, let's unravel that particular part. So the first thing to say is that if Andy Burnham does win and there is a leadership challenge, the two polls we've had of Labour members suggest that Andy Burnham would easily defeat Keir Starmer, whereas, by the way, Wes Streeting would lose to Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner would only have the 50-50 shot. So in other words, if Andy Burnham doesn't win the by-election, Keir Starmer might be able to hang on to his job, at least in the immediate future. Will there be an Andy Burnham bounce if Labour win? Well, we've had two polls on that. One from BMG suggests, well, no more than 2 or 3 points. Reform would still be ahead. Another from More in Common suggests it would be a rather bigger bounce, maybe enough just to put Labour ahead of Reform. But the truth is, hypothetical polling should be taken with a fair pinch of salt, because inevitably getting voters to anticipate how they will feel when they see Andy Burnham as Prime Minister and beginning to see him in office, we don't know. Of course, all of this is very redolent of the speculation that surrounded the possibility of election when Gordon Brown succeeded Tony Blair as Prime Minister in the middle of 2007. And there was Gordon Brown allowed that speculation to set off, and then almost seemingly at the last minute drew back, and that was pretty much the end of Gordon Brown's chances of being able to win the next election. I mean, at the moment, one has to say it's always the case. Just think about it. We are only 2 years into this Parliament. That means there are 3 years left to go. You've got to have a very, very good reason to want to give up the prospect of 3 years in order to gain 2. Now, Theresa May did that in 2017. Didn't do her any good, I'm afraid. So the truth is that I think if Labour were wise, they will not allow this speculation to run off. Andy Burnham's already said he wouldn't do it. And I think, at the moment, at least, the polling evidence suggests that it would be a very highly speculative move, in which it's certainly, even if Labour did better than the current polling suggests, rather a lot of Labour MPs would end up losing their seats.
And finally, John, I'm just back from America, actually. The Americans are very keen to understand what's going on in UK politics, because they see our system through a similar eyes to their own. They think we still live in bipartisan politics, two-horse races, when actually what we've seen is a splintering of support on the left and the right to various parties. Do you think we are sort of now doomed for coalitions of one sort or the other going forward? Or with this sort of new fragmented politics, is there still, looking at all the runners and riders and the way first past the post works, and an opportunity for a single party to get a majority?
Oh, there's certainly an opportunity for a party to get a single majority, but at the moment that party is Reform. It's not either Conservative or Labour. I mean, they are, given their current lead, given what we know about the geography of how Labour support has fallen away, and it's fallen away above all in places where they're previously strongest, you can see how Reform, with just the 28% of the vote they've got, and that is all they have got, being able to win an overall majority under our current electoral system. So yes, our current electoral system could, if one of the parties out of the 5 that currently are serious players is well ahead of the rest, then yes, they could win an overall majority. But equally, if we continue with our fragmented politics, and that's one of the $64,000 questions, winning an election is certainly going, with an overall majority, is certainly going to be a much less likely event than certainly what we got used to for most of post-war British politics.
Sir John, thank you ever so much. Your wisdom and expertise is always greatly appreciated. Sir John Curtis, Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde. The man needs no Aston, as we call it in the biz. Everybody knows him. He's part of the furniture now, isn't he, of the airwaves. Right. probably should do the list, I'm guessing. So here we go. Jake Austin for the Liberal Democrats. Count Binface for the Count Binface Party. Andy Burnham, the Labour Party. Dan Clark, the Libertarian Party. John Dyer, he's running as an independent. Ed Gemmell, Climate Party. Paul Gold, another independent. Alan Howling, Lord Hope, the official monster raving loony party. Robert Kenyon. Reform UK, Robert Pownell, Protect the Wild. Rebecca Shepherd, Restore Britain. Sarah Wakefield, the Green Party. Peter Ward, Rejoin the EU. And Michael Winstanley for the Conservative Party. Right. Shall we squeeze in a little voice note before we go to break? And then after break, by the way, I want your calls and I want your messages. So roll up. 03444 991 1000 is the number to call. It's your normal network rate. You can also send me a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp on that number, 87222. Write the word talk before you text. And shall we have Darren show us how it's done? Let's have a listen.
Good morning, Alex. Darren from Warsaw. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Steam coming out of my ears. Mark Francois, the Uni Party. Oh, John Healey's an honourable man. He has resigned for his own leadership ambitions, pure and simple. Oh, John Healey, he knows what he's on about. John Healey didn't even know how many frigates we got in the Navy. So don't give me this old pony, he knows what he's on about. Mark Francois. Oh, honourable man, this honourable that. Al Keynes, oh yeah, honourable man. Did a disappearing act when it come down to the Northern Ireland bill, persecuting our soldiers. Yeah, that's how honourable he is, mate. Uni Party, give it a rest. Great show, Alex.
There you go. That was a brilliant Darren leaving a voice message there on defence. If you want to be like Darren, the number is 03444 991 1000. We're taking a short break and we're going to be doing some calls just after.
I think the trigger for this is people
You
using
think they just did it for no reason whatsoever? You think they rioted last night for no reason?
They took to the streets last night because they were thugs who wanted to engage in violence.
What about the peaceful protesters? There were peaceful protesters all over Northern Ireland as well.
They have a right, as they always should, to protest, but there is always going to be a difference of opinion when it does come to whether it's a legal migrant or an illegal migrant, whether it's a person who has come here to seek refuge or whether it's someone who's come here to work.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Let's jump straight into some calls. Looking forward to these. Let's first of all speak to Martin, who is in London. Good afternoon, Martin.
Afternoon, Alex. How are you?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. Well rested, but it doesn't take long for the blood pressure to ping straight back up as soon as I sit in this seat.
Yeah, I've got quite a few things I'd like to get off my chest about that bitter, pompous old fool that is Rupert Lowe.
OK, indulge me.
For the life of me, I cannot understand what some people see in Rupert Lowe and his new party. I mean, for a start, it's not even a party. It's basically an old man with a Twitter account, which is all it is, with a sort of ragtag and bobtail motley crew of sort of ethno-nationalists, which is basically a Q word for racist, because they all think that you can't be British unless you've got white skin. I mean, I remember listening to your evening show a few months ago, and two of these clowns from Restore Britain went on your show and ended up making complete fools of themselves. And yet this whole thing is about stopping Nigel Farage because Rupert Lowe is bitter with a massive ego.
Oh, I mean, I'm sure he is bitter for certain. I don't think he has a blimmin' clue what's on his social media accounts. I don't think he knows. I literally don't think he's got any view of it whatsoever, quite frankly. And I know the man, remember, had to serve in the European Parliament with him. And I remember him standing down in 2019 to help the Conservatives then, and the little deals he was doing behind the scenes with them. And when he decided he didn't want to be the candidate for Dudley North because he didn't want to allow a left-wing government to come into power. Funny, seems to have changed his tune somewhat now, doesn't he? And it's interesting, there was an article in The Sun about a year ago, just after he phoned me up and we had an hour-long conversation. Well, you call it a conversation. I think I was just subjected to a foghorn of pomposity. But he was telling me back then, oh, the Tories, oh, they keep coming up to me, oh, they really want me. I was like, oh, still friends with them, are you? Still speaking with them, are you? Just saying. By the way, he's more than welcome to come and sit here and answer my questions. He won't, of course. In a million years, he won't. He won't sit there. He doesn't do any interviews anymore, have you noticed? Neither does his candidate. But
he used to come on talk quite a lot, and you just don't see him anymore. And I remember after the general election, he was on the media quite a lot, and he was fine. But then I remember Elon Musk tweeted that he no longer supported Nigel Farage and he wanted Rupert Lowe to be the leader. And from that moment on, something changed with him.
Who told him that?
Well,
look, I don't know the answer to that, but someone was whispering in his ear that was the direction of travel at the same time. And look, if people can go on and Google a company called Cyabra, Cyabra. They were the ones who did the huge audit on Twitter before Elon Musk bought it and turned it into X. They are the world leaders at flagging bot farms. And they did a big report a year ago when Rupert Lowe suddenly became a social media phenomenon. And, well, let's just say they found a lot of evidence for strange behaviours, as they would find right now. So my question is, who's doing this? Who really wants to see reform not get a majority? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Really? It is.
Probably. We know, because I remember listening to Rupert Lowe banging on about how there were people in the Tory party were speaking to him. I can remember him on another channel mentioning that. So maybe there's something to do with that. But my concern is also, I think there are some people that have been drawn to Restore Britain that perhaps don't quite realise just what they are. I mean, if you go on social media and if you look at some of the really nasty racist abuse that Layla Cunningham has had, you don't have to be you don't have to be Poirot to go that far and do deep digging and seeing a lot of these people have got Restore Britain timelines.
Well, did you know? I've never. So I've been subjected to all manner of abuse, as you would imagine, in the job that I do, particularly from the left wing. Especially the FBP lot. Do you remember them? All those ones they used to send all that. And it's funny, in one breath, you've got Mr. Lowe going, oh, isn't it terrible, misogynistic cultures and, in Islam and women and protection of girls. I have never, ever received the sort of disgusting, terrifying, threatening, extreme misogynist abuse that I get from people who support that party. Extreme, I tell you. So I'm just flicking through now because there's a particular listener who's been bombarding the messaging system with horrible things about me today. Multiple messages coming in from this one particular Rupert Lowe advocate. And it just, this is what I've come to expect from them now. So he sits there, doesn't he, go, oh, women and girls, I'm standing up. It's like, no, you're not. He's one of the... Well, anyway, I sat by that man in the European Parliament, and many of his former colleagues as well, who sat by him in the European Parliament, don't really have much nice to say about him. And for good reason. Here we go. We know exactly what you're doing. Beep. We're not stupid. Beep. Oh, it goes on and on and on. It's just vile. Look, it doesn't bother me. Whoever's sending them, he goes by the name of Red. I don't care, to use the words of Rupert Lowe. I'm a big enough girl. I got a thick enough skin. I will say what I want to say. I have fought my way to get to this position in life, and you don't have to tune in, sunshine. But at the end of the day, we just had a polling expert say that, well, you know, it is going to split the vote because that's the bare numbers of the situation. If you want to see that happen, fine. If you want to see a left-wing government, fine. You know, but don't pretend that these things aren't facts. Now, people can support and vote for who they want. That is politics, and everybody has a right to set up a political party and, you know, give it a good go. But by all means, you know, everyone has a right as well to say, well, look, what's happening is a certain entity's peeling votes from here. Isn't it funny that they only attack that? That's called reporting facts, right? That is what one is supposed to do as a journalist. And if facts bother you, well, sorry. Sorry if you feel so distressed. But you know, Martin, that's politics, isn't it? I've lived through 20 years of it, and it's always full of insanity and madness. Make it stop. Anyway, Martin, thanks for your call, my darling. We're going to be speaking to James now, who's a new caller from Fife. Hi, James.
How you doing, Alex?
Hello. How are you?
How are you doing? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I want to speak about Restore. I know you've just been saying that Restore people are all crazy.
No, I didn't say that at all. Far from it.
I know. But basically, I just think these are giving Restore a hard time. I mean, I think Restore have done really well over the last year. The rape inquiry, everything they've done. I mean, nobody else has touched that. They've done that of their own back. And I think they deserve credit for that.
In terms of this, the inquiry, the difficulty is they were warned not to do this and not to publish anything because we have got a statutory inquiry coming up. A statutory inquiry means people are legally obliged to be called to give evidence, and that could potentially lead to prosecutions if there is evidence of collusion. Now, the difficulty with having a sort of vanity project inquiry beforehand is that it prejudices the statutory inquiry. So rather than actually see people potentially being prosecuted for cover-ups, prosecuted for enabling one of the most horrible atrocities that's ever happened in this country taking place, you could have lawyers turning around in the dock going, well, my client cannot have a fair trial now because this took place.
This has already happened. Alex. This happens all the time. Like, we've just seen it in the airport case. The Muslim guys got off because they hit a police officer. So this is the first steps of covering up. This is why they have these private inquiries. What Rupert Lowe did was actually put it out into the public eye that what actually happened. He read the transcripts of the things that were said, and some of it was horrific.
I know, I speak a lot to the survivors of this stuff. There's a number of survivors of this stuff who are deeply upset because they feel they've been totally taken advantage of for political reasons. But it doesn't change the fact that multiple people warned, because Reform at one point looked into doing this independently, multiple people warned, actually, it has a negative effect.
And it's the same with their policies. Reform's policies have all just changed in the last 6 months because they've had to compete with Restore. They've seen what Restore is putting out and they know they can't compete, so they've had to get extreme and they've had to start talking about deportations. They have no intention of deportating anyone.
Hold on.
The guy in Belfast who just done that horrible attack was actually brought in to the country by Reform.
Let's deal in facts and information here, first of all. Facts and information. He wasn't brought into the country by Reform. That's madness. He came into the country before Reform essentially existed as any sort of major player. He came in under a Conservative government. Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman resigned from it because Rishi Sunak wouldn't let them do what they wanted to do in terms of immigration. At least that is what they say. So it's slightly more nuanced than what you were saying. It doesn't change the fact about an independent faux inquiry potentially jeopardising the real inquiry, which could lead to actual prosecutions. That doesn't change. That is factual, by the way. And when we're talking about policies on deportations, etc., look, a party, manages and writes its policy prospectus over the course of months. And for a long time, Nigel Farage, for 30 years, quite frankly, has been the sort of custodian of the arguments about managing immigration at a time when the Overton window was massively far behind him. And a lot of people, when you compare the interviews of both men, would say that actually the person who's got the strongest take and the strongest position on managing immigration and a plan to put it together is Nigel Farage.
That's rubbish. That is absolutely
So it's
rubbish.
not. Have you gone back and looked at the archive interviews?
He's complicit with the immigration. He wants immigration.
How do you mean he wants immigration?
He wants immigration. He wants.
Does anybody out there believe that? Do you actually think that he's all of a sudden he's banging the drum for illegal migration and?
You can all the hairs you want, but the legal migration is just as bad as the illegal. There are as many people coming from back of lorries as there are on boats.
Do me a favour, go and Google what reforms policies are. Go and Google what restores policies are. Come back to me, because actually, when I put them together on Grok, when I did an AI comparison of the both from what's already been published, actually, under reforms plans, more people end up being deported. So there you go. But don't let facts stand in the way of a bit of Kool-Aid, my friend. Anyway, like I said, everyone can vote for who they want to, but what I say in every situation is just do your research. It is a precious thing, having a vote. It is a real privilege to be able to live in a country where we can technically have our say in democracy, and for a long time we seem to have been denied just that because of the shenanigans and game playing and gaslighting of the establishment. And it just feels to me like that is still going on. Anyway, brilliant calls there. And like I said, I'd love to hear from anybody who wants to phone the show and give me their opinions. And like I said, everyone should just go away and research things. Don't take my word for it. Sometimes we all make mistakes in our reporting, but I do tend to read a lot. I am across a lot of stuff because that is my job. And I'm only going to give you the information as it stands. And as for who I would vote for, well, I don't know. Maybe I'll set up the Alex party and the world would be shocked at my policy. Shocked, I tell thee. But there you have it. I just want people to be informed. That's all. I hate the idea that people are taken for granted and messed about and tricked, which has just gone on for too long in UK politics. Do you know we've got dirtier politics in the United Kingdom when it comes to internal fighting, when it comes to these sorts of games? We have dirtier politics than most other countries in the world. And I've worked on election campaigns around the world, and I just think there's something really disgusting. There's a rot at the heart of politics in this country. They don't care about you. They don't want to fight on the basis of policies. They draw up a manifesto to try and gaslight you and tear it up the minute they get into office. And we're sick of it. We're sick of having a rotating circus of useless, spineless leaders who never actually stand up and do or deliver what they say they're going to. We're sick of the same old Svengalis and Rasputins pulling the puppet strings from on high. We're absolutely sick to death of the sort of landed establishment always getting their own way by playing tricks, which means the same characters never have their fingers very far from the levers of power. You know, the WF Davos types. We're sick to death of people who think that we don't matter as voters, that they can play their games at our expense because we're too stupid to understand what they're doing. We're easy to manipulate and control. And even when they can't, well, they just ignore us instead. We're sick to death of it. And we can see the impact it's having on the country. So that's why I would implore to anybody in this country who looks at what's going on and says, I've had enough, please just do your research. Yes, be guided by your heart and your gut, but also make sure you've looked into things. Because it's very easy to go down wormholes online where all of a sudden you've got a load of, you know, women in their 20s thinking the Green Party is all hugging trees and happiness. And you just think, have you seen some of their policies? Huh? Have you seen they want to decriminalise drugs and prostitution, have open borders? How do you think that's going to work out for womankind in this country? Not very well. Because you speak to people, so I'm going to vote Green because they seem nice. And you tell them about some of their policies. No, they don't want to do that. I'm like, yes, they do. We live in an information era where everything is at our fingertips. You can Google stuff. You can go on Grok, Chat, GPT, whatever your search engine. You can find the information. You don't have to just live according to algorithms on social media. Our democracy is too precious to waste on allowing yourself to be messed about and brainwashed by a few powerful people who can drive millions into defeating algorithms or having bot farms or whatever it may be. You still have the power to get to the truth. And so what I'd say is just do that. Just get to the truth. Get those facts. Get that information. And then, my darling hearts, my patriots, my brilliant British people, you vote for who you want. It doesn't matter if it's Zach Polanski. It doesn't matter if it's Count Binface. It doesn't matter if it's Reform, Restore, the Conservatives, Labour, Lib Dems, Plaid, the SNP, everything in between. You vote for who you want to, but your vote is precious. So just do a bit of research. Turn off Facebook, turn off X, and just go and find the answers for yourself. You might just change your minds. Right, OK, on that note, we're going to be taking a short break, and it's been brilliant having your calls and having your messages, so keep those coming in. When we come back, we're joined by the excellent Danny Shaw, Home Affairs commentator, former advisor to Yvette Cooper. We're going to be asking him all about the current situation with asylum seekers, hotel accommodation, a lot of it, HMOs. He's going to have the facts, and I do like facts. That's coming up after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. Well, it turns out that the asylum court backlog has actually surged to a record high in just a year. The number of asylum appeals waiting to be heard jumped by 71.5% to 87,450 in the year to December, compared to 50,976 at the same point last year. Let's speak to Danny Shaw, Home Affairs commentator, about what is going on. We keep being told that we've got the lists down by this government. We're sorting it. It ran, you know, wild under the Conservatives, and yet looking at this headline today, that doesn't seem to be the situation.
Well, Alex, I think you're right. What this government has done is start to take asylum decisions. So the initial decision backlog has fallen from around 85,000 to 35,000 in 2 years. So that's good. But then what happens is, when decisions are made to refuse a claimant asylum, they have the right to appeal. In those circumstances, they go to an appeal process. And what we're seeing, as you pointed out, is the appeals backlog has gone up hugely. So it's really just simply that the backlog has shifted from one category to another category. Now, what the government is trying to do is going to try and increase the number of appeals that it gets through by changing the process and bringing in adjudicators, rather than having a tribunal judge deciding all the claims. They haven't got that process up and running yet. When it happens, we'll have to see whether they get through the claims more quickly or whether there's, further appeals from that. But this is the problem. These cases have to be decided one way or other. Under the current rules, people have a right to appeal it, and so they exercise those rights.
It seems to me that they get the right to appeal on multiple occasions. I've read various instances where someone's on their fourth appeal. Yeah. And all of this stuff is done via legal aid as well, isn't it? So we're sort of, the poor taxpayer is paying both the government to defend itself against someone else who's also getting taxpayers' money to challenge the government who wants to send them out of the country. Is there not a way that, let's say, Shabana Mahmood can turn around and go, right, that's it, no appeal system, the decision is final?
I don't think you can have a system where you make a decision and you're basically, this is a decision that's a life and death decision for some people. Whatever your view about immigration, whatever your view, there will be some people where you are making a decision about their life or their death. And in those circumstances, there has to be a route for them to appeal. But where I do agree with you is there are some people who are gaming the system, and there are too many avenues to appeal and too many points at which they can appeal. I think the Home Office is trying to simplify that and reduce the possibilities for appeal, and it needs to be streamlined. I mean, I think it's right that you make your claim, and at that point you present your evidence. You can't keep coming back and having more bites at the cherry saying, oh, there's something else I forgot to tell you, or I've got a bit more evidence. I don't think that's appropriate. I don't think that's right. I think there should be basically one chance, one appeal, and then it's done. And, you know, if you resource this system properly, then I think you can get through the cases much more quickly.
Let's talk about the infamous Bell Hotel in Epping Forest in Essex. Of course, it sort of became at the forefront of the ongoing debate or battle over asylum claims and migrant hotels after Hadush Kabatu, one of the residents from Eritrea, sexually assaulted a 14-year-old girl. It's now transpired that apparently it is no longer functioning as an asylum hotel. There have been various protests, of course, around that particular location. What do we know about this? Because I think one thing is for certain, you know, if the residents are no longer in the Bell and Epping Forest, they haven't been put into some sort of Hercules and sent off to a remote island. They're going to be moved somewhere else.
Well, what we understand is that the hotel has been closed because of fire service regulation issues. So presumably it was felt that it was unsafe for people to be there. There were 138 migrants there last autumn. I think that number had been reduced a bit. So those people, so finding spaces for 100 people is not an impossible task to do, Alex. But the reality is some of them may have gone to Wethersfield, which is not that far away, which is also in Essex. There's a big camp there, an ex-army camp that's been used to house migrants. And it is possible that they've gone there. It's also possible that they have been put into what's called dispersal accommodation, which is essentially rented houses and flats across the country. It's better that they're in that kind of accommodation than cooped up in a room in a hotel, which should be used for the community and for holidaymakers and tourists, etc. So I think that is a good sign. And it is true that the number of people in asylum hotels has come down under the government. 29,000 2 years ago, now down to around 20,000, probably a bit lower than that now. When you remember at its peak under the Conservatives, it was 56,000. That's no mean achievement to get the numbers in asylum hotels down. So I think you have to give some credit, but still some way to go.
You say about dispersal accommodation, better that they are in, you know, essentially HMOs, rented accommodation in these hotels. My worry, Danny, is this. A lot of people, when they come over from war-torn countries, seem to sort of lose their passports in the process. So we don't really know who they are. We don't know whether they've got criminal records. We don't know their intentions. We don't know their affiliations. And they're certainly not about to fess up all to, you know, the Home Office or Border Force in the process of trying to get leave to remain. My concern is when they're put into dispersal accommodation is there's limited eyes on, that this could present a security threat. Certainly if I was Al-Qaeda or the Taliban or ISIS or whomever, and I wanted to get my operatives into the country and used illegal immigration routes as an avenue to do just that, I think it'd be music to my ears if they were stuck up in rental accommodation and not in a hotel where at least, you know, to some degree of security on the door.
Well, there's a bit of security on the door, but frankly, Alex, I mean, you know, in an asylum hotel, I think there's more opportunity for people to cause mischief, to be cooped up in those conditions in some of those hotels. That these are not palaces. You know, if you think you're in a room, a small room with a toilet, and you've got to, you know, cook there or just eat the canteen food, I mean, it's not great. At least if you're in a house or a flat, I think you have to accept that's better. And if they're in slightly better conditions, I think there's less chance that they'll get involved in crime. But I agree with you, it is a real concern that people come across. We don't know exactly who they are. There have been cases of people who've come across on false identities and committed the most horrendous crimes. And we know that a number of those cases are highlighted, have been highlighted over the past couple of years, which is why those cases have to be processed through the system as quickly as possible. And where people are gaming the system, or they've come here illegally, or there's security risks, then they need to be removed. But there are also other refugees who are genuinely fleeing persecution and need support. I mean, some people from Sudan, from Somalia, from Ethiopia may have witnessed the most absolutely appalling scenes in those countries and will be traumatized. And that's a real concern, because if people have suffered that kind of trauma or witnessed violence and beheadings, then that doesn't leave them and makes them vulnerable and makes them more likely to possibly to go out and commit crimes in the UK. And so we need to be thinking, if these people are in the UK, what eyes are on them? What support are they getting to address those underlying issues?
Yeah, no, indeed. I mean, the trauma of sort of living in the sort of vile warfare that you get in those parts of Africa especially doesn't bear thinking about, and I think does make people potentially a huge risk to society. And just finally, is there not a worry with the idea of HMOs and dispersal accommodation? Certainly, I think it's a big worry that there are people at the moment queuing up in Calais and, you know, further afield going, we want to come to England and get our free house.
Well, yeah, I mean, we know that the UK is a magnet for many migrants for a number of reasons, partly to do with the English language, partly to do with historical ties, and partly a perception that at least they're going to get an asylum claim processed. And while that's happening, they will get some benefits, not very much, but they will get some benefits and they'll get some accommodation. And, you know, that's a real issue. But, you know, my answer to this would be resource the immigration system properly so these cases are turned around swiftly, really swiftly. If you come here, it's obvious it's a bogus claim, remove, deport within days. I don't think that happens enough. But that is my answer to this, is make the decisions really quickly, resource the system so that people can see actually it's not going to be a freebie for months and years, which it has been historically.
Danny, thank you ever so much. Danny Shaw, their Home Affairs commentator. Right, now, before we go to a break, I want to tell you about a competition that we're running because the FIFA World Cup kicked off yesterday. Our friends at talkSPORT are sending you and a buddy straight to New York City with Adidas, the tournament's official match ball supplier. It's the ultimate trip to watch England face Panama live at the MetLife Stadium. With that, you're going to get your return flights, hotel, match tickets and some cash money to spend. All of it taken care of. Plus, Adidas is going to be throwing in the official Try-On-The match ball, as well as a fresh pair of boots. Don't miss out. Here's how to enter.
For your chance to win, head to our friends at talksportwin.com or text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate, or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close on the 12th of June 2026 at 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talksportwin.com. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
I think the trigger for this is people.
You think they just did it for no reason whatsoever? You think they rioted last night for no reason?
They took to the streets last night because they were thugs who wanted to engage in violence.
What about the peaceful protesters? There were peaceful protesters all over Northern Ireland as well.
They have a right, as they always should, to protest, but there is always going to be a difference of opinion when it does come to whether it's a legal migrant or an illegal migrant, whether it's a person who has come here to seek refuge or whether it's someone who's come here to work.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Oh, look at this, if only to be a civil servant. Note that I have shows on a Saturday and Sunday. Don't worry, it's not like Monday to Thursday. I'm sitting there whistling and, you know, drumming my fingers on a desk. Get up to all sorts, me. But it turns out if you work at weekends, you are paid extra money in the civil service, £11,000 no less. Private secretaries, the civil servants who work most closely with ministers, get additional payments on top of their salaries to compensate them for long and unpredictable working hours. In 25 last year, 30 senior civil servants were paid allowances worth £345,000, in total 11.5 grand each. This was nearly double the amount paid to 25 senior civil servants in 2016. Well, let's speak now to William Yarwood, Campaigns Director at the Taxpayers Alliance. Well, with a big salary and a big job becomes big responsibility. Seems like we're going to have to pay them extra for them being at the top of the tree, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. First of all, I'm surprised that civil servants are actually working past 5 p.m. and on weekends. That's a surprise to me, and I'm surprised to many of your listeners and viewers who will probably view the civil service as being a wholly inefficient and more or less useless operation. But yeah, like they call it allowances, but let's not just forget the fact that this is just more taxpayer cash going into the back pockets of Whitehall officials who already receive quite generous pensions, salaries, flexi time, working from abroad, and the whole 9 yards. So in reality, this is just, they think they're entitled to it. But in reality, plenty of taxpayers out there in the country work past 5 p.m, work on sociable hours, and work weekends. I mean, I do it myself plenty of the time, but I'm not there clamouring for more allowances or more expenses or more money, because obviously I love what I do. But when it comes to civil servants, they think they're entitled to this kind of stuff, while taxpayers are left in the dirt just having to do basically what they consider to be a normal part of their overall job.
I mean, this is the thing. When people out there who, are on the average salary, if not lower than the average salary, or are self-employed and work round the clock, and they see more and more money being taken from their taxes, and they find out that the people who are recipients of that money seem to have gold-plated pensions, they can work from home, huge amounts of holiday entitlement, London waiting if they happen to live inside the capital, and all these extra perks and benefits, it just doesn't seem fair, does it? I mean, we keep having strikes and we keep being told, oh, well, the public sector's suffered, wages haven't kept up with inflation and cost of living. Surely it seems to me now you're far better off working in the public sector than the private sector.
Yeah, completely. And I mean, look at the difference between private sector productivity and public sector productivity. I mean, public sector productivity has been on the floor for a very, very long time. And if public sector productivity was high and things were efficient and things were working well, you might maybe make an argument that, sure, OK, we'll let some of these allowances and let some of this flexi time and other perks, fly by. But in reality, the public sector is wholeheartedly inefficient. And like you said, they constantly go on strike, demanding even more cash, even though most of them get inflation-busting pay rises every single year, while normal taxpayers working in the private sector don't see that kind of money ever go into their back pockets. But the issue is, Alex, that fundamentally the public sector is funded by taxpayers, and therefore they don't actually have any real concern or any real constraints on what they can demand, because ultimately it's not money that they're taking out, it's money they're asking from British taxpayers, which would ultimately ultimately be driven away from, other, public services, or even desired through bigger tax hikes. But yeah, look, I think that this is just it's a snapshot into a wider problem in the public sector, in the civil service, in the NHS and elsewhere. And I think it needs rooting out, from top to bottom.
I think it does indeed. I mean, I think we could probably get rid of 2/3 of the civil service. I don't know where you stand on that one, William, but you're always there to save us a buck. Get rid of it. Drain the swamp, as Donald Trump would say. William, thank you ever so much. As William Yarwood, Campaigns Director from the Taxpayers Alliance. All right, let's do a few messages, shall we? Jan the man from Blackburn, wouldn't it be marvellous with the cameras of the world upon them if England fans in the USA create a World Cup Sir Keir Starmer special chant? Haven't they already done that? I heard that football fans have been sort of, shouting out loud the W word, so to speak. Mike in Colchester says, I'm 54 and Nigel Farage has been the most consistent voice on immigration in this country for most of my adult life. Our once great country is now so close to the brink. The right have to unite. Difficult as it may be for some egos, Restore should stand down in Makerfield so Reform can win and pile a heap of pressure on the government. A Burnham win will help nobody except Andy Burnham. But they can't stand down now because nomination papers are in. It's too late. And it's not like their candidates really doing interviews or anything anyway. Alex, the situation with Reform and Restore is similar to that of the DUP and the UUP. If the latter got their act together, they would regain control of Stormont and the First Minister post. I fear that the Reform Restore situation will allow a united left of Labour, Green, the SNP and Lib Dems to storm into power. Oh, make no mistake. Right. Shall we have a little chit-chat now, because he's finally come in. I was waiting for you, Ian.
That's all right, I'm here.
I was told on my screen that you were going to be in for 12:57. You do realise you're a minute 30 seconds late.
We had microphone issues.
That's an epoch in broadcasting terms.
Indeed. Did somebody just say the Lib Dems are going to win?
Oh, no, like lefty coalitions.
Oh, I see. I thought like the Lib Dems on their own are going to win an election.
Makerfield is just like... Actually, the world is...